Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Navigation. Comprehension Heaven-Defying, Understanding 8-Gate Escape at the Beginning. Chapter 1. So dark, I can't move my body. There is water all around. Am I drowning? Sensing the surrounding environment, Wong Luffy struggled subconsciously. Yeah, Luffy, are you awake? Suddenly a pleasant female voice sounded next to his ears. Wong Luffy immediately calmed down and listened carefully. No, Luffy, Mom will be in pain if you do this. Now that your father is not around, you can't bully your mother. You have to be obedient. Just be patient a little longer, you will be born in a few months. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. The woman's words made Luffy feel shocked. Am I traveling through time? He also traveled through time and became an unborn baby. At this time, the woman's voice sounded again. That's right, Luffy. Mom forgot to tell you. Your name is Monkey D. Luffy. This is what your father, Monkey D. Dragon, and your mother thought about together. Quote. Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Luffy was shocked again. Monkey D. Luffy, Monkey D. Dragon, isn't this a character from the One Piece world? He actually traveled to the world of One Piece and became the protagonist Luffy with the same name as himself. About Luffy in the original novel, he thought back. With extraordinary talent, strong bloodline, and profound background, he can be said to be the chosen one. Luffy was naturally extremely excited to be able to travel through time and become such a character. But there are also many regrets about Luffy in the original work. He watched Yuta, Ace, and the Golden Mary that gave birth to the ship Spirit die and be destroyed in front of him. Not only that, in the original work, Luffy, a straight man, is favored by so many female characters, but he has no interest in women and is still single. These are things that Luffy doesn't want to happen to him now. But to change all this, the most important thing is to improve one's own strength. In the world of pirates, strength is king. Only if you are strong enough can you take the initiative in your own hands. Therefore, Luffy will never continue to temporarily become stronger when facing various crises according to the rhythm of the original work after already knowing these things. However, according to the timeline, he was able to obtain the human fruit, phantom beast species, and Nika form after meeting Shanks at the age of 7. In the first 7 years, what he had to do was to do his best to train and strengthen his physical skills. And the fighting method that best matches this devil fruit is physical skills. Therefore, it is very necessary to practice physical skills. Thinking of taijutsu, Luffy couldn't help but think of Might Guy from Hokage Ninja. One-handed 8 inner gates can be said to be the pinnacle of physical skills, and he almost kicked out the finale. Just as he was thinking this, Luffy felt his eyes suddenly go dark. Immediately afterwards, a picture slowly emerged in his mind. A very open space. Powerful energy fluctuations suddenly shot into the sky, and a blood-stained red dragon suddenly appeared. The explosion in the air caused by the dragon was as deafening as a dragon's roar. And on the head of this terrifying dragon that seemed to be able to tear everything apart, there was a man with blood-red skin, a ferocious face, and scarlet blood eyes staring at the opposite side. Might Guy. Luffy naturally recognized this man at a glance. Chakra, I approve of you. In terms of physical skills, among the people I have fought against, no one is stronger than you. I, Madara, would like to call you the strongest. The person who said this was naturally the invisible pretentious Uchiha Madara. After Uchiha Madara finished speaking, the red dragon roared and charged out with overwhelming force. Wherever it was swept, the earth cracked and shattered, and the space was distorted and deformed. Might Guy roared and kicked in the air. The red dragon then swooped down, opening its ferocious mouth, and pounced on Uchiha Madara. The moment Might Guy collided with Uchiha Madara, the scene in front of Luffy also disappeared, and his consciousness returned to reality again. Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through visualization, you can understand it personally and derive your exclusive skills, 8 inner gates. The words that suddenly appeared in his mind shocked Luffy. He just recalled the moment when Might Guy exploded, and then his consciousness seemed to be pulled by an invisible force. Then, when he regained consciousness, he realized the 8 inner gates. Comprehension Heaven-Defying, is this my cheat? Luffy thought to himself. Not only did he travel through time and become the chosen one, he also gained such a heaven-defying cheat. If he doesn't take off again, he will really be sorry for his ability. 8 Inner Gates. Exclusive skills you gain through heaven-defying comprehension and visualization. When your physical condition reaches a certain level, you can automatically master how to open the 8 inner gates. This introduction came to mind again. Luffy understood immediately. 8 inner gates is an extremely powerful physical technique, so it requires very high physical fitness. So even if he now understands the 8 inner gates skill, he cannot use it immediately. Especially the 8 inner gates, the 8th gate, the gate of death. It is said that this 8th gate can only be opened once in a lifetime, and then it will die due to the exhaustion of its vitality. At this time, Luffy suddenly thought of a possibility. After the Nika fruit abbreviation awakens, it will have an ability that can be called a bug, the Drum of Liberation. As long as you hear the Drum of Liberation, you will regain your strength and become immortal. If you open the 8th gate in the awakened state, will you not die? Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through deduction and understanding, you know that in the awakened state of the Nika fruit, you can fully recover again by opening the 8th gate. Luffy was overjoyed when he saw the reminder in his mind. It is actually possible to open the 8th gate in the awakened state and use Night Guy. After the Nika fruit is awakened, it can greatly improve various physical qualities. If you open the 8th gate again under this situation, use Night Guy. That power, not to mention instant kill, can definitely easily crush the Emperor. While he was thinking about it, Luffy suddenly felt a little sleepy. His current physical and mental state was still too weak, and the consumption of deductive understanding was enough to exhaust him, and he soon fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up again, Luffy didn't know how much time had passed. But what surprised him was that he seemed to feel that his physical fitness had become stronger. Your understanding is heaven-defying, and you can learn exclusive skills while resting, and strengthen them to the extreme. Extreme strengthening. When your body function reaches its limit, after adequate rest, your physical fitness will achieve a breakthrough and be greatly improved. Your understanding is heaven-defying, you can comprehend your exclusive skills while eating, and you can digest it extremely quickly. Extremely fast digestion. When you eat to obtain nutrients, they can be quickly absorbed and digested and used to restore physical strength and strengthen your body. The information suddenly displayed in his mind made Luffy understand immediately. It turned out that he had reached the limit of his body after comprehending the 8 inner gates last time, and his current stronger physique was due to the new ability he had comprehended, limit strengthening. As for the extremely fast digestion, he must have acquired this ability because he absorbed more nutrients from his mother through the umbilical cord after physical exertion. People in the pirate world generally have a pervert physique. Their stomachs are in a ball and they can be digested quickly. If they have no physical strength, they can recover a lot by eating something. And these two abilities of Luffy are just some enhancements to the abilities that his original physique already had. After thinking about this, Luffy, who had just realized 2 new abilities, fell into a deep sleep again not long after. At the same time, I gained a deeper understanding and gained new abilities. A few months later. Father, I leave Luffy to you. Don't worry, leave it to me. I will definitely train him to become the best marine. Just listen to Grandpa, Luffy. Not long after Luffy was born, his mother gave him to Garp. Then she kissed him on the forehead, and for some unknown reason, left at sea. Watching his mother, whom he had only met once, gradually move away and disappear over the sea, Luffy couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He knew too little about his mother. I don't know how to keep him at all. This irrevocable departure reminded him of the scene in the original book where Ace died in front of Luffy. In a daze, Luffy's vision went dark, and his consciousness came to a certain scene in his memory. Naval Headquarters, Marineford, see clearly, Whitebeard. On the execution platform, Sengoku gave an order, and the 2 executioners next to him raised their swords high and were about to chop at Ace's neck. Stop! Luffy, who was blocked by countless Marines, roared angrily, but still couldn't break through the blockage. Seeing the 2 big knives falling lower and lower, Luffy's eyes suddenly condensed and he roared with all his strength. Stop it! Suddenly, an unparalleled momentum swept around with Luffy as the center. Countless marine pirates on the entire battlefield suddenly stopped moving, rolled their eyes, and fainted. The picture in his mind disappeared at the same time. Garp, who was holding Luffy, suddenly trembled and subconsciously looked at the baby in his arms, his eyes trembling. Then Luffy suddenly burst out with an unparalleled powerful aura. A terrifying purple-black lightning, with Luffy as the center, set off a powerful air wave that swept away in all directions, covering the entire island. All the residents on this island, and the vast majority of Marines, without exception, lost consciousness after looking at each other. This is. Garp looked at the sleeping baby in his arms in shock, and was excited and incoherent. After a long time, Garp calmed down and said something slowly. "Are you a born king, Luffy?" Time flew by. 7 years later, East Blue, Windmill Village, next to the woods behind the village. Luffy rested his arms on his back, lying flat on the grass, crossing his legs and looking at the sky quietly. "It has been 7 years since I came to this world. For 7 years, Garp has been unable to take care of him because of his status as Marine. So Luffy grew up eating hundreds of meals in Windmill Village. Among them, the one who cared about him the most was Makino, who ran the tavern in the village. Because of his heaven-defying understanding, he quickly learned and mastered basic life skills under Makino's guidance. After that, he began to practice independently. So far, he has mastered the 8 inner gates to the point where he can open the 5th gate. In Hokage Ninja, Xiao Li drove to the 5th gate in the Chunin exam, broke through Gaara's invincible defense, and severely injured him. Of course, in addition to taijutsu, he is also practicing Haki. When he was born, he spontaneously awakened the Conqueror's Haki. Observation Haki and Armament Haki have frequent contact with Garp and a group of Marines from Naval Headquarters. It is not difficult to understand from them through heaven-defying comprehension. However, the only ones he can improve are Observation Haki and Armament Haki. Conqueror's Haki can only be strengthened as one grows and becomes more courageous. Therefore, he only practiced his proficiency in controlling it to the point of perfection. Now he can easily control Conqueror's Haki to only be used on a specific target. Gu. I'm so hungry, it's almost time to go back. Putting away the thoughts in his mind, Luffy touched his growling belly, then a carp erected, and planned to return to the village. "Makino, I'm back." When he walked to the door of the pub, Luffy suddenly heard laughter and noise coming from inside. "Are there any guests?" Luffy muttered and pushed the door open. Suddenly, an extremely cheerful and lively scene came into view. In the tavern, 2 men punched each other. The surrounding area was filled with spectators holding glasses of wine and cheering for him. Soon, Luffy saw a somewhat familiar man with red hair in the crowd. "Shanks, Luffy, welcome back. Are you hungry? I've prepared your meal." Seeing Luffy come in, Makino greeted him warmly. Even if Luffy didn't mention it, she already brought out a large plate full of food as if she had expected it. Luffy came to the bar, sat next to Shanks, and began to inhale. "Oh, you're so young, but you have such a big appetite." Shanks couldn't help but let out an exclamation when he saw that Luffy's appetite far exceeded that of an average adult. Well, this isn't enough." Luffy's mouth was full, so he took the time to squeeze out a sentence. "Vomit, cough, water. While speaking, Luffy didn't pay attention and was choked. He stretched out his hand towards Makino in pain. Ha, funny kid." Shanks laughed and pushed a cup towards Luffy. Luffy didn't hesitate, took the cup and started drinking. "Mr. Shanks, your glass is wine." Luffy is still a child and cannot drink. Seeing Luffy holding a wine glass and drinking heavily, Makino said worriedly. Ha, what does it have to do with it? Men have to drink. This kid looks like a man." Shanks didn't care and laughed. Due to years of exercise, Luffy's body looks very strong. And because of the rapid digestion skill, Luffy has absorbed far more nutrients than his peers in these years, so he is taller than in the original work. This led Shanks to give such an evaluation. "Don't worry, Makino, I won't get drunk." After finishing a large glass of wine in one gulp, Luffy put down the glass and assured Makino. But despite this, Makino harshly rejected him. "No, you can't drink any more, Luffy." After saying that, she handed a glass of water to Luffy and took away Shanks' glass. Luffy still respected this mother-like existence and nodded in acceptance. "Is your name Luffy?" "I'm Shanks, captain of the Red Hair Pirates." Shanks looked at Luffy with interest and greeted him politely. I am Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will become the Pirate King. After Luffy finished speaking, he continued to work on his food. Unexpectedly, after he said these words, the originally noisy tavern suddenly became quiet. Everyone looked at Luffy, who was immersed in his rice with strange eyes and remained speechless for a long time. Luffy, you said such strange things again. If Mr. Garp hears it, he will teach you a lesson again. Makino advised in a low voice. One Piece, what an amazing dream. Shanks sighed and looked at Luffy with more appreciation. At this moment, a figure suddenly rushed to Luffy's side. Immediately afterwards, a sweet and childish female voice sounded in Luffy's ears. The one who wants to become the Pirate King is Shanks. Stop dreaming. Luffy turned his head and looked around. Standing next to him was a girl with half red and half white hair, dressed fashionably. At this moment, she was puffing up her face and staring at Luffy with a contested expression. He recognized this girl at a glance. It was Shanks' daughter, Yuta. Also, do you, a kid like you, know what One Piece is? You're just talking nonsense here. Yuta continued to argue, very dissatisfied with a child like Luffy saying such things. Because Shanks once explained to her the meaning of the Pirate King, she always believed that only Shanks could become the Pirate King. And Luffy's irresponsible remarks like this are disrespectful to Shanks. The Pirate King is the freest person in the entire ocean. Luffy squeezed out a sentence between meals again. As soon as he said these words, Yuta, who had already thought about how to respond to him, was stunned. Because this is exactly what Shanks explained to her. Even Shanks and the rest of the Red Hair Pirates crew, who had been watching, were shocked by Luffy's words. Who would have thought that a child who looked only 7 or 8 years old would have such cognition? Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through personal experience, your courage is improved. Your courage is increased, and your conqueror's haki is strengthened. A prompt suddenly came out in his mind, which made Luffy couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. It seems that as long as you make a bold choice at the right moment, the courage that affects Conqueror's haki can be improved. At the same time, Shanks and all his subordinates suddenly looked shocked when they looked at Luffy. Especially the sharpest Shanks. He unexpectedly discovered that Luffy exuded a little bit of the king's haki at that moment. Especially after having that feeling, when I looked at Luffy again, the other person's courage seemed to have risen to a new level. This unusual feeling shocked Shanks and made him involuntarily think of the purpose of his visit to East Blue. Find the next owner of the Nika fruit. Of course, he couldn't hand over the Nika fruit just based on simple feelings. For Luffy, he still needs a long time to think about it. After putting away his thoughts, Shanks started to care about the deflated Yuta and tried to smooth things over. Okay, Yuta. Being the Pirate King is not that easy. You should stop competing with Luffy. We're going to be here for a long time, so just get along with Luffy. Although he was surprised that Luffy could say such things, Yuta was still unwilling to recognize Luffy easily. HMPH. Didn't you say you wanted to become the Pirate King? Then let's compete. If you can't even win against me, the daughter of Captain Shanks of the Red Hair Pirates, don't say such ignorant words in the future. Luffy glanced at Yuta and then decisively rejected her. Don't want. After holding back all his strength but having nowhere to release it, Yuta suddenly became even more angry, clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Why, are you afraid? If you're scared, just admit defeat. Luffy said with a helpless look. Why do I have to compete with you? There is no reason at all. Yuta was already so angry with Luffy at this time that she just wanted to give him some color as soon as possible. Then tell me, what do you need to do before you are willing to compete with me? Hearing Yuta say this, Luffy instantly became serious, looked at Yuta and said. There are winners and losers in the game. If you lose, join my pirate team. When Luffy proposed this condition, Yuta, who was still aggressive at first, hesitated. This meant that if she lost, she would have to leave the Red Hair Pirates and leave the Shanks. Yuta looked at Shanks for help, but Shanks kept smiling, as if he was letting you make the decision. In fact, this is in line with Shanks's style of doing things, and he will definitely respect Yuta's own wishes. Seeing Yuta struggling, Luffy waved his hand and opened his mouth to make a rescue. Well, I just said it casually, so don't worry about it. He knew that if Yuta continued to hesitate, she would definitely choose Shanks. And when he said this, it was regarded as giving Yuta a step down. However, no matter what the competition is, you can't beat me. At this time, Luffy added that he didn't want Yuta to say that he gave in because he was afraid. Yuta had just developed a crush on Luffy because he gave her a chance to step down. But when I heard the next sentence, I was furious again. You guy, come to a showdown with me. Didn't I say? Hurry up. The first competition event, arm wrestling. 3 months later. This time it's race rowing. On the coast, Yuta gritted his teeth and looked at Luffy next to him unconvinced. I said Yuta, it's almost time for you to give up, right? In the past 3 months, you have competed with me 136 times. And your record is 0 wins. Luffy responded helplessly. Stop talking nonsense, I will definitely beat you this time. Yuta didn't even listen to Luffy's response and spoke angrily. Did you see that stone in the sea? We will end with that stone. Whoever reaches the stone first will win. Following Yuta's instructions, Luffy looked into the sea. But with just one glance, he could see the clues. That piece of stone is clearly the king of the inshore sea near Windmill Village. But he didn't tell Yuta this information. As long as he gets close enough, Yuta will definitely shrink back in fear when he discovers that the stone is the king of the offshore sea. When the time comes, she will definitely be willing to give up. Thinking of this, Luffy suddenly became full of energy. Come on. Game 137. After the two were ready, they set off at the same time at Yuta's order. After all, Luffy's physical strength was much stronger than Yuta's, so she quickly fell behind. How about it, Yuta? Aren't you going to admit defeat yet? Yuta gritted her teeth, and the oars were smoking as she swung them around, as if they had formed a phantom. Stop talking nonsense, the game isn't over yet. After saying this, Yuta swung even harder. Luffy smiled and increased his speed. At this moment, the stone that had been sitting there quietly suddenly rose. Immediately afterwards, the two saw a giant moray eel-like monster rushing out of the water, opening its sharp fangs and looking at them fiercely with scarlet eyes. At this sight, Yuta was immediately frightened, her eyes began to turn white, and her body could not stop shaking. Aren't you going to give up yet, Yuta? Seeing this situation, Yuta still didn't look back, and Luffy couldn't help but ask again. They are getting closer and closer to the king of the offshore. If they don't look back, it will really be too late. You haven't given up. I won't give up. Yuta was so scared that she was shaking when she spoke, but she still kept moving forward. Luffy suddenly felt helpless when he heard this. For Yuta's safety, he had no choice but to make a U-turn first. Okay, Yuta, this game is cancelled, let's go back first. However, Luffy had already started walking back, but saw that Yuta still had no intention of turning around. Just as he was about to ask, he heard Yuta say tremblingly while holding back tears. No, I can't do it anymore, I don't have the strength anymore. As soon as Yuta finished speaking, the king of the near sea swooped towards her. Meanwhile, Makino Tavern, Shanks, who was drinking, suddenly put down his glass with a serious look on his face. Seeing the sudden change in Shanks' expression, the men who were originally jolly and playful stopped. What's wrong, boss? Shanks frowned. I have a bad feeling about it. Where are Yuta and Luffy? An informed subordinate replied. They said they were going to a rowing competition. As soon as his men finished speaking, Shanks dashed out of the tavern. The rest of his men saw this and followed closely. Makino Tavern is not far from the shore. In the blink of an eye, Shanks and other cadres arrived at the shore first. Shanks was startled when he saw the Sea Kings rushing toward Yuta in the distance. Immediately afterwards, he focused his gaze and planned to use Conqueror's Haki to intimidate the Sea Kings from a distance. But at this moment, Shanks, who was originally serious, suddenly looked shocked, and all the cadres around him also widened their eyes in disbelief. They watched helplessly as the Sea Kings, who had been extremely fierce, suddenly seemed to be extremely frightened, and then fell into the water and disappeared. The moment before the Sea Kings disappeared, Luffy exuded an unparalleled powerful aura. And this momentum is only aimed at that Sea Kings. Just now that was. You can't go wrong, it's Conqueror's Haki. Luffy, Is he actually the same king as the boss? While his men were shocked, Shanks was also extremely shocked and thought to himself. At such a young age, not only did he awaken Conqueror's Haki, but he also mastered it so skillfully. Could it be that he was born to be a king? Luffy, could it be that? Are you really the person I'm looking for? Makino Tavern. Cheers. Wahahaha. The cheerful and lively atmosphere was once again restored in the tavern, with everyone raising glasses and having an ever-present banquet. At the bar, Luffy and Shanks sat together, next to Yuta, who said nothing, as if he was angry with him. Yuta was extremely dissatisfied with the fact that she was so scared that she lost strength. No one bothered her and let her recover on her own. See Gui, Luffy, I didn't expect you to have mastered Conqueror's Haki. Luffy's ability is still vivid in his mind. Shanks was truly shocked that a child of only 7 years old mastered Conqueror's Haki so skillfully. He believed that not even his former captain, the previous pirate king, Roger, had such a terrifying talent. Yeah, it seems that I woke up when I was born. Luffy recalled the sudden awakening of Conqueror's Haki when he was born. The conquerors he unleashed unconsciously at that time were much more powerful than they are now. It's a pity that awakening is different from actual mastery. The power he showed when he awakened meant that he had that potential. As for now, he still had to continue to grow and improve his courage. When Shanks heard this, a flash of shock flashed in his eyes, and he thought to himself, is he really a born king? There is a big difference between awakening conquerors and mastering conquerors. If you want to master conquerors to the extent that you want to do it, you need to train over a long period of time. So after Shanks learned that Luffy had mastered conquerors, he guessed that he was a born king. And it must be Garp's careful guidance that made him grow up so fast. Suga, that means your Haki was taught by Mr. Garp. No wonder you can control it so skillfully. At this time, some pirates nearby also started cheering and sighing. As expected of that hero Garp, he was able to train a 7-year-old child to be so powerful. That's the hero Garp, the captain who was the boss back then. Hey, don't talk too much, you drank too much. Just as the pirates were making noises, Luffy said something softly. No, Grandpa never taught me. Every time he comes back, he leaves after only a few days. As soon as he finished speaking, the tavern suddenly became extremely quiet. The pirates' eyes were filled with obvious shock. They looked at Luffy in disbelief and fell into a daze. Even Shanks was shocked, and his calm mood was once again stirred up by Luffy. Shanks said in disbelief, Luffy, what you mean is that your current strength is all yours? Luffy nodded silently. Suddenly, the expressions on Shanks and everyone in the tavern were even more shocked. A child who is only 7 years old is not only a born king, but he has also mastered Conqueror's Haki without anyone's guidance. Such a terrifying talent, let alone Shanks, even Garp and Roger may not be able to match it. Shanks' eyes involuntarily moved to a box on hand. I started to struggle inside. Bang! At this moment, a loud noise suddenly came from the door. Everyone followed the sound and saw that the door of the tavern was kicked open. A man with his hair tied in a bun and a cross scar above his right eye walked in with a group of young men. Luffy naturally recognized the person. The legendary bandit king who killed 56 emperors, Sig. Excuse me. Sig uttered a sentence indifferently, and then glanced at the pirate in the tavern. He immediately let out a contemptuous snort and continued. Are these the so-called pirates? They all have stupid faces. Seeing a guest coming, Makino immediately greeted him. Even though the visitor was unkind and kicked down the door of the tavern, he still remained polite. Welcome. Sig had already arrived at the bar and was standing on the other side of Shanks. We are bandits, but we are not here to cause trouble. Sell us the wine quickly. We need about 10 barrels. Makino responded with an apology. Sorry, all the wine has just been sold out. Sig glanced at the wine glasses on the pirate tables around him and pretended to be confused. Isn't that weird? Are these pirates drinking boiled water? Makino continued to explain patiently. Because the wine sold now is all. When Sig heard this, he frowned and became very angry. When Shanks saw this, he started to smooth things over from the side. This is really embarrassing. It seems we drank all the wine here, sorry. If you don't mind, this bottle is for you. It hasn't been opened yet. Shanks handed over an unopened bottle of wine. Sig slowly raised his hand, making a gesture to pick it up. But to everyone's surprise, Sig suddenly clenched his fist and smashed the bottle in Shank's hand with one punch. Lousy as a prisoner with a bounty of 8 million Baileys. A bottle of wine is not enough for me to rinse my mouth. Don't underestimate me. Seeing this scene, Yuta, who had been silent all this time, gritted his teeth and his eyes were filled with anger. As for Shanks, his body was soaked with wine, but he didn't seem to care at all. Instead, he looked at the equally wet floor and the glass shards all over the floor, and said apologetically to Makino. The floor is wet. I'm sorry, Ms. Makino. Do you have a rag? As Shanks said this, he squatted down and cleaned up the broken glass on the ground. Seeing this, Makino hurriedly ran out of the bar. I'll just come. But at this moment, Sig suddenly pulled out the saber from his waist, and with a sweep, smashed the plate and wine glass in front of Shanks to the ground. It seems that you like cleaning very much, so you can wipe enough. Shanks let himself get wet from the drink and sat on the ground without saying a word. Seeing this, Sig became even more contemptuous, and then said to the younger brothers behind him. It's boring without wine. Let's go. Before going out, Sig didn't forget to taunt the surrounding pirates again. Goodbye, you losers. After all the bandits left, one remained silent and the pirates who remained silent suddenly burst into laughter. Wow, ha ha ha. The boss is really being bullied so badly. It's so embarrassing. Shanks also opened his mouth and laughed, looking like he didn't care at all. Seeing the strange behavior of these pirates, Yuta, who had been holding back his anger, finally burst out. Why are you still laughing? Don't you think it's embarrassing? You can defeat that kind of bandit easily, right? Shanks, why don't you fight back? Yuta has been sailing on the sea with the red hair pirates for 7 years since she was picked up by Shanks at the age of 2. For 7 years, they have been a fearsome presence for other pirates wherever they go. When have you ever been so angry? So when she saw her father, Shanks, being bullied like this for the first time, Yuta couldn't bear it anymore. Shanks comforted Yuta gently. It's just that I got drunk, don't worry about it at all. Yuta still looked confused and angry. Don't be like those bandits, Yuta. Well, they're just a bunch of frogs in a well. The sound of Luffy talking while eating came from behind. Meanwhile, in Luffy's mind, your understanding is heaven-defying. Through personal experience, your courage is improved. Your courage is increased, and your conqueror's haki is strengthened. Conqueror's haki has been strengthened again. Luffy was secretly happy. Shanks looked surprised when he heard Luffy's words. That's right, Yuta, listen to what Luffy said. While speaking, Shanks turned back, preparing to give Luffy a grateful look. But when he saw what Luffy was eating, Shanks was shocked. What are you eating, Luffy? At this moment, Luffy was holding a purple fruit with strange lines in his hand, eating it with big mouthfuls. After hearing Shanks' question, Luffy pretended not to know. What do you mean? I looked delicious, so I couldn't help but eat it. But after eating it, I realized that this fruit is really not that unpalatable. Having said that, Luffy still finished it. Can't waste it. That's not an ordinary fruit, it's the rubber fruit that turns people into rubber people. Shanks explained loudly. He subconsciously wanted to rush over and ask Luffy to spit out the fruit, but suddenly he thought of the legendary saying. Devil fruit will consciously search for its owner. Thinking of the inspection of Luffy these days, Shanks suddenly felt relieved. Luffy may be the person he has been looking for. Makino Tavern. Luffy. Yuta called Luffy's name and rushed into the tavern anxiously. Shanks suddenly said she was leaving today, so she came to Luffy to say goodbye. But her eyes swept through every corner of the tavern, but she could not find Luffy. Ah, it's Yuta, Luffy said when he got up in the morning that he went to practice his new abilities and wasn't in the pub. Thank you, Ms. Makino. After hearing this, Yuta thanked Makino and went to find Luffy. She has been with Luffy almost every day for more than 3 months, so she naturally knows where he usually goes to train. However, just as Yuta was about to leave, the door of the tavern was pushed open again. Immediately afterwards, a group of arrogant people walked in swaggeringly. Seeing the person coming, Yuta suddenly became angry and frowned. The people coming were none other than the bandit Sig and his gang who had insulted Shanks last time. Sig's eyes swept across the empty tavern, and he suddenly showed an expression of disdain and said contemptuously, "It seems that the stupid pirates are not here today." The younger brothers who were following him also laughed when they heard this. "Ha ha ha, those cowards must be afraid of us and don't dare to show up here." "That's right. Have you seen the faces of that group of pirates before? They were splashed with wine and didn't even dare to say a word. Those guys are so useless. HMPH. Pirates are just useless at best. They can only act cool. How can they compare with us bandits?" Listening to the bandits' various insults to Shanks, Yuta's fists clenched tighter and tighter, and his anger was completely ignited. "Shut up, you are not allowed to insult Shanks and the others." Yuta's sudden outburst interrupted the bandits' taunts and laughter. The leader Sig suddenly frowned and looked at Yuta with a fierce look in his eyes. "Oh, are you a brat going to stand up for those cowardly pirates? Those pirates are really cowards. They are not as brave as a kid." Ha 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 ha. Hearing Sig mocking and insulting Shanks again, Yuta became angrier, gritted his teeth, and said angrily despite Makino's dissuasion, "Shanks and the others are not cowards. Shanks can take care of bandits like you with just a snap of his fingers." When Sig heard this, the smile on his face suddenly disappeared, his eyes were filled with anger, and he said angrily, "What did you say, kid? How dare you look down on us bandits? I am a big bandit with a bounty of 8 million belly. I have killed 56 of these pirates like those. Lousy has already cut down 56 of them. So far, no one who angered Lousy has survived. You angered Lousy." As soon as he finished speaking, Sig reached his hand to his waist and placed it on the saber. Yuta saw the opponent's tense look. Although he knew he was outmatched, he was not afraid at all. The bandits were so insulting to Shanks that she couldn't ignore them. "Yuta, are you really here?" During the fierce confrontation between the two sides, a familiar voice suddenly came from outside the door. "Shanks," Yuta exclaimed in surprise. "If Shanks is here, we will definitely give these bandits a hard lesson this time." The bandits naturally heard the voices behind them. A group of people filed out and confronted Shanks and his group. Sig looked at Shanks and others with disdain and laughed. "Ha ha, what, are you wimps here to die?" Shanks ignored Sig at all, but looked at Yuta who came out of the tavern, pulled Luffy beside him, and said with a smile, "Yuta, we have found Luffy for you. If you want to say goodbye, go tell Luffy now." "Okay, let's go quickly. We're running out of time. A marine ship is about to arrive." Yuta glanced at Luffy with a complicated expression, and then at the bandits who looked contemptuous, but he still forcefully retracted his anger, wanting to say goodbye to Luffy properly at the last chance. "Who said you can leave?" At this time, Sig suddenly pulled out his long knife and blocked Yuta's way. "This brat has pissed off Lousy. So far, no one who angered Lousy has survived. If you want to help her, you will all die here today." After Sig finished speaking, all the pirates took out their weapons at the same time. Each one looked confidently at the silly pirates opposite with a playful expression. At this time, Shanks slowly moved forward and said to Sig, "I'm sorry, my daughter has more important things to do now, so please let her go." Seeing Shanks begging for mercy in a low voice, Sig suddenly became even more proud. "Ha ha ha ha, brothers, have you seen it? Is this a pirate? He's just a real loser." Behind Sig, the younger brothers also started laughing. "Ha ha ha, pirates are such cowardly beings. Facing a powerful opponent, they don't even have the faith to resist. Pirates are such useless people. They are just a bunch of cool guys. When they really start fighting, they turn into complete trash. Ha ha ha." Facing the cynicism and humiliation of the bandits, Yuta's inner anger was once again ignited. However, she did not look at the pirate, but looked angrily at Shanks, who had always looked like Shisui, and asked loudly, "Why, Shanks, why don't you fight back? You can deal with this kind of bandit with just a few clicks of your fingers, right? Why do you keep putting up with them? They have already been bullied to the extreme, why should they be allowed to be humiliated?" Yuta asked Shanks loudly, tears falling from the corners of her eyes involuntarily. Shanks still lowered his straw hat and said calmly without changing his expression, "Because we have no reason to take action." "Reason?" Yuta let out a light sigh. Shanks raised his head, looked at Yuta, showed a bright smile, and continued. This group of bandits is different from us red hair pirates. They are a group of guys without beliefs and dreams. We, the red hair pirates, have no reason to take action against a guy like this. If we, the red hair pirates, just fight against them just because they were drunk and humiliated, then we, the red hair pirates, will be the same as these guys. Yuta, you are also a member of our red hair pirates. You have no reason to take action against a guy like this. After Shanks finished speaking, Yuta was stunned. She simply couldn't understand the reasons Shanks gave. As for Sig, he was completely angered by Shanks' words. He held the knife tightly and slashed at Shanks. You fool, you actually said that we don't deserve to let you take action. Then just die for lousy. Seeing the big knife slashing at Shanks, Yuta suddenly exclaimed. Shanks. When, with a crisp sound of iron collision, Sig's knife was blown away by Shanks' body. Of course, it was impossible for a pirate of this level to hurt him. Even so, Yuta still looked extremely angry. What's going on with you guy? Sig was extremely shocked. He didn't expect that it didn't cut through Shanks' body, but instead shocked his arms to numbness. Sig, who did not believe in evil, once again prepared to chop at Shanks. Seeing that Shanks still looked unmoved, Yuta couldn't help it anymore. Tears flowed out of her eyes like a fountain, and she shouted to the sky, then suddenly turned her head and looked at Luffy, who had been watching. Hey, Luffy, you didn't just say that casually, did you? Luffy was stunned and didn't react for a while. What did you say? Yuta cried loudly. You said you wanted me to join your pirate group. That wasn't just a casual talk, was it? Luffy nodded after hearing this. Yeah, I'm serious. Then help me beat these bandits away, and I will join your pirate group. But, you are fragrant. Before Luffy could finish speaking, he was interrupted by an angry Yuta. From now on, I am no longer a red hair pirates person. I'm different from them. Facing a guy like this, I simply can't ignore him. I can't go against the will of red hair pirates, so I want to quit red hair pirates. With tears streaming down her face, Yuta loudly announced to everyone present. When Luffy heard this, his expression suddenly became serious and he said in a deep voice. That's it, I understand. After saying that, he clenched his fists. That's it, I understand. After Luffy finished speaking, he clenched his fists, took a step forward and stood up. Facing this group of bandits, he can indeed rely on Conqueror's Haki to kill them instantly. However, where in Conqueror's Haki can you feel the relief of punching to the flesh? Seeing Luffy stand up, Sig's attention was immediately attracted. But when he saw that the other person was just a kid who looked similar to Yuta, his disdain suddenly surfaced. Ha, do you want to die too, kid? I think you are stupid for staying with this group of pirates. You don't know the terror of lousy as a bandit. Pirates like them, lousy. Halfway through Sig's words, a black shadow suddenly shot out, passing through Shanks like a bullet, and landed on his face in an instant. Immediately, Sig felt as if he had been hit by an angry bull. His teeth shattered, his body flew backwards uncontrollably, and he lost consciousness in an instant. It's so noisy. Luffy retracted his fist and murmured impatiently. He moved his wrists and then turned his attention to the remaining bandits. At this moment, the bandits' mouths were wide open, their eyes seemed to pop out, and they were completely glazed over. When their eyes met Luffy's, all the bandits trembled and looked frightened. What was that just now? Is it that brat's fist? Am I drunk? Why do I seem to see that kid's arms stretched out? Rather than that, the important point is that this brat punches away the boss, right? As that guy, a monster. Don't be afraid, we have guns. No matter how powerful he is, can he still block bullets? One of the bandits suggested something, and some of the bandits with guns stood up immediately after hearing the words, pulled out their guns and aimed at Luffy. Bet your life on it. Shanks, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. Ah, a bandit who pointed a gun at Luffy looked confused. Just listen to Shanks continue. If you draw a gun, you have to risk your life. The bandit looked puzzled. What are you talking about? Shanks turned his head and pointed at the gun aimed at Luffy. I said, this thing is not a toy used to scare people. Bang. As soon as he finished speaking, a gunshot rang out. Lucky Lu, who was chewing a chicken leg, suddenly appeared beside the bandit at some point, with white smoke coming out of the gun in his hand. Seeing his accomplice suddenly killed, a bandit suddenly panicked and looked at Shanks and said angrily, "Aren't you guys speechless?" Shanks looked at the bandit and said slowly, "We had no reason to take action just now. But now, you are pointing a gun at our friends, and we are not going to turn a blind eye." When Shanks finished speaking, smoke billowed from the field. In the blink of an eye, all the bandits fell to the ground. On the coast, at the port, Shanks and his group have already loaded all the supplies onto the boat, and they can leave just waiting for Shanks to get on the boat. At this moment, Shanks was standing on the shore, and in front of him stood Luffy and Yuta. At this moment, Yuta bit her lip, holding back tears, and looked at Shanks with eyes full of reluctance. Shanks looked at Yuta with a smile and loving eyes, and said softly, "Stop crying, Yuta. We will definitely meet again. One day, you will realize your dream, bring joy to people with your singing, and start a new era." Hearing this, Yuta nodded heavily, gritting his teeth but unable to say a word. Shanks turned his attention to Luffy again. "Luffy, it's up to you, Yuta." Luffy touched Yuta's head and solemnly promised, "Leave it to me, I will definitely protect her." Shanks smiled, trusting Luffy's assurance. At this time, Shanks suddenly took off his straw hat and put it on Luffy's head. "Luffy, I will leave this hat to you for safekeeping. It is my most important hat, so you must take good care of it. When you become an excellent pirate one day, give it back to me. We have an appointment, Luffy." After saying goodbye to the two of them and Makino and other villagers who came to see him off, Shanks turned around and walked up the gangway. On the calm sea, a warship sailed slowly. Card, Vice Admiral Garp, there is a pirate ship. A panicked voice suddenly broke the calm. Garp, who was lying on the deck to rest, slowly opened his eyes after hearing this and said nonchalantly, "Sink it." Unexpectedly, the adjutant who was reporting the situation to him did not leave, but continued with a shocked look on his face. "Yes. The other party is red hair pirates. No matter what the red-haired or green-haired pirates are, if they dare to approach Windmill Village, just sink it." Garp ordered impatiently. Suddenly, he jumped up from the recliner and looked at the adjutant in shock. "What did you say? Red hair? Are you talking about the red hair pirates from New World?" The adjutant looked nervous and nodded solemnly. Garp was immediately startled, and quickly came to the side of the warship, looking at the pirate ship that was only a few hundred meters away from them. At this moment, Shanks was smiling and waving hello to him. No wonder the naval headquarters spread the news that the red hair pirates suddenly disappeared from the New World. Did they come here after all? Garp recalled the news he heard from Sengoku, and at the same time he was filled with questions as to why Shanks came to his hometown, Windmill Village. Vice Admiral Garp, attack. The adjutant looked at the red hair pirates who were gradually moving away from the attack range of the warship and asked Garp. Garp frowned, still thinking about Shanks' reason for coming to Windmill Village. Hearing the adjutant's question, he shook his head in denial without thinking much. "Don't attack. If you attack here, the villagers will be affected." Garp noticed a group of villagers standing at the port on the coast of the village. He also saw that Shanks didn't seem to be hurting innocent people, so he didn't plan to take action. Windmill Village, coast, port. The red hair pirates' ship had just left, and Garp's warship entered the port not long after. "Hey, Luffy, I'm back. Are you ready to be trained by me to become a good marine?" As soon as they docked, Garp, who saw Luffy, stood on the edge of the boat and shouted excitedly, then jumped up and came to Luffy. Suddenly he noticed a strange girl who was about the same age as Luffy and dressed fashionably next to Luffy. Garp's eyes suddenly lit up. He was so excited that he kept hitting Luffy on the head like a rubber ball. "Oh, you're quite capable, Luffy. It's so quick to prepare our monkey family for the future. Whose daughter is this? Why have I never seen her before?" Luffy's body was getting shorter and shorter by Garp's shots, and he replied with his mouth squeezed into his neck. "Her name is Yuta, she's Shanks' daughter." Garp continued to pat Luffy, but his eyes kept falling on Yuta. "Suga, it turns out she is Shanks' daughter. No wonder he looks so good-looking." Suddenly, Garp suddenly raised his arm, slapped it with extreme force, and exclaimed in disbelief. "What did you say? She is the red-haired daughter?" Luffy was almost knocked into the ground by the slap. At this moment, his body had shrunk to only half of its original height. The surrounding villagers who saw this scene were frightened, their eyes seemed to pop out, and their chins almost touched the ground. Garp finally noticed the abnormality at this time. After turning his head and seeing the shrunken Luffy, he exclaimed in disbelief again. Luffy, what's wrong with you? Luffy, ... After a while. So you became like this after eating the rubber fruit that the redhead brought? Garp said while pulling Luffy's face back and forth like a rubber band. The task of escorting the Nika fruit arranged by the 5 elders was handed over to the CP organization in secret, so Garp does not know that the rubber fruit Luffy ate is the Nika fruit. I said you can stop now, right? I'm not your old man's toy. Luffy looked away from Garp's hand holding his face and said helplessly. When Garp heard Luffy's words, he immediately grinned and gave him an iron fist of love. Grandpa, how many times have I told you to call me Grandpa? Is this the way you should talk to Grandpa? Luffy squatted on the ground, holding his head in pain and grinning. Whose grandpa is as ruthless as you? When Garp heard this, he immediately bared his 2 rows of front teeth, raised his fists and said, Hey, this is my fist of love. After saying this, Garp suddenly became serious and said seriously, Luffy, come back to Naval Headquarters with me. Shanks' sudden appearance made Garp aware of the danger. He has been a Marine for so many years and has punished countless pirates. At the same time, countless enemies were created. He used to ignore Luffy's excuses for wandering around Windmill Village because it was in a remote location and almost no one could find it. But things are different now. Since Shanks can find this place, then his enemies can also find it. If Luffy is left undisciplined like this, he will most likely be hunted down by his enemies one day. So he thought about taking Luffy with him so that he could better protect him. Luffy had no idea what Garp was thinking. He refused Garp's question without even thinking about it. No, I want to be a pirate. Marine, that is, working for the world government and serving the disgusting celestial dragons. He would not be stupid enough to become a Marine and work for the celestial dragons. The Revolutionary Army is restricted everywhere and must always be hidden. Among other professions, only pirates have the most freedom. Even though Luffy originally wanted to be a free adventurer, sailing on this sea will always violate the rules of the world government intentionally or unintentionally. To put it simply, as long as you show a little bit of fame and attract the attention of the world's authorities, then you can stop being an adventurer. Either accept the recruitment of the world government, or be wanted and forced to become a pirate, because the world government cannot allow you to develop without restrictions. Therefore, for Luffy who wants to be free, the only way to become a pirate is currently the most suitable one. Garp had already expected Luffy's answer. He had heard this answer hundreds of times. But to Luffy's surprise, Garp did not give him a loving iron fist this time as usual. Instead, he seemed to be thinking about something, with a little worry and concern in his eyes. Suddenly, Garp lost his worry, as if he had made a decision. Then the corners of his mouth raised, revealing a strange smile. Hey, Luffy, speaking of which, as a grandfather, I have never taught you personally. As soon as he finished speaking, Luffy was picked up by Garp and thrown into a small boat on the shore. Luffy, Yuta saw that she was about to be forced to separate from Luffy, and she suddenly shouted worriedly. Don't worry, I'm just taking him for special training for a while. I will send him back after a while. Garp explained, but Yuta looked reluctant and shook her head vigorously. She just heard Garp say that he was taking Luffy to Naval Headquarters. Shanks has left. If Luffy leaves her again, she really doesn't know what to do. Grandpa, take Yuta with you. Luffy couldn't bear it at this time. Shanks had just left and it was when Yuta needed company, and he didn't want to leave Yuta alone. After hearing this, Garp said nothing more, picked up Yuta again, and threw her into the boat. A few days later, a small island in East Blue. Here we are, this is where I'm going to give you special training. On the coast, Garp put his hands on his hips and said with a wicked smile. This small island is deserted and full of ferocious beasts and poisonous insects, all of which are extremely powerful. It is the best place for training. At this moment, Luffy and Yuta could hear the roars of various beasts and the chirping of insects, one after another, which was extremely intrusive. Luffy didn't care at all. If this were a beast island in the New World, he might be worried that he wouldn't be an opponent. But what powerful beast can East Blue, the weakest among the four seas, breed? No matter how strong he is, he can only reach the level of the king of the near sea. At this point, Garp continued. You know what, Luffy? Actually, there has always been a powerful force hidden in you. This power awakened once when you were born. But you released it unconsciously at that time. Now, I'm going to teach you how to control this power. Roar. At this moment, a terrifying beast roar sounded. What appeared next was a huge beast that was 5 to 6 meters tall, lunging at a few people from one side with its fangs and claws. Luffy tilted his head, his eyes focused, and an unparalleled aura was suddenly released from his body. Immediately afterwards, the beast was sweating all over, looked frightened, glanced at it, and fainted. Is this what you're talking about? At this time, Luffy said something casually. Upon seeing this, Garp nodded repeatedly like a rattle. That's right, that's right. That's what I'm going to teach you. Quote. Suddenly, Garp's body froze in place as if someone had pressed the pause button. His mouth opened wide and his eyes widened, looking at Luffy in disbelief. After being stunned for a moment, Garp shouted in disbelief in a roaring voice. When did you learn to master the Conqueror's Haki, Luffy? Garp's voice caused the entire island's beast roars to instantly become silent. Luffy took out his ears that were buzzing from the shock and said casually. Probably when I was 3 years old. I was already able to master it at that time. What did you say? There was another deafening roar. Luffy and Yuta both couldn't help but cover their ears. Old man, can you speak more quietly? Luffy didn't even know how this old man could speak so loudly that his eardrums were about to burst. Sorry. Garp immediately recovered when he saw the painful expressions on the two children. Call. At this time, Garp suddenly took a long breath and turned to speak. Now that you have mastered Conqueror's Haki, I have nothing more to teach you. He originally thought that Luffy had never received the correct guidance after awakening Conqueror's Haki. Now Luffy may be in danger again, so he decided to give some guidance. But who would have thought that this kid would have figured out the secrets himself and mastered it at the age of 3? This pervert's talent was something he had never heard of before. Probably not even comparable to his former rival Roger or even Rox. But now that Luffy has mastered it, he has nothing to teach him. As for Haki's more advanced uses, such as Conqueror's entanglement ability, Garp has never even thought about it. No matter how talented you are, it is impossible to learn it at this stage. Absolutely, impossible. Seeing that Garp no longer seemed to have any intention of teaching him anything, Luffy immediately started thinking about countermeasures. This was a rare good opportunity. Usually the old man had no interest in teaching him, but now he wanted to get something from this old man no matter what. What? So this is your most powerful move? Marine is not that strong after all. Pirates are still stronger after all. Luffy crossed his fingers, rested his head on the back of his head, and whistled sideways, looking disappointed with Marine. When Garp heard Luffy's words, he immediately became excited. Are you saying that Marine is no good and not as good as pirates? How could he bear this? It seems that this is the reason why his grandson doesn't want to be a Marine. This is true, he has never taught Luffy or shown him how powerful Marine is. And Luffy often dealt with pirates who passed through the village, so he developed a yearning for pirates. Especially for a big pirate like Shanks, Luffy must have been attracted by seeing some powerful ability in him. In other words, as long as he shows the powerful side of Marine, Luffy may change his mind and return to naval headquarters with him to become a Marine. Thinking of this, Garp clenched his fists and became full of energy. HMPH. Luffy. Grandpa will let you see the power of Marine today. Watch it, Luffy. After saying that, Garp walked to a giant stone. He raised his right fist, and a flash of black immediately enveloped it. Immediately afterwards, Garp's aura suddenly changed. An unparalleled amount of powerful energy spurted out from his body and rushed towards his fist. The energy was tangible, like purple-black flames wrapped around Garp's fist. Immediately afterwards, Garp waved forward slightly, and the flame flowed from Garp's arm to the giant stone. Boom! The seemingly powerless attack actually smashed the boulder into pieces. How about it, Luffy? Is this good enough? At this time, Garp put away his fist and looked at Luffy proudly. Your understanding of Heaven-Defying, through personal visualization, understanding, armament hockey entwined, emission. The hint in his mind made Luffy happy. But he still looked dissatisfied. Aren't there any more powerful moves? It's just a matter of breaking a stone. I can do it even if I hit it a few more times. Being looked down upon by Luffy once again, Garp was completely motivated. HMPH. Luffy, let me show you what the top power in the world looks like. Garp came to the coast and looked at the boundless sea in front of him. He suddenly jumped up and seemed to disappear from where he was. So fast. Luffy was secretly shocked. When he spotted Garp again, he was already 100 meters above the ground. Then, an even more powerful energy than before was seen spurting out of Garp. The energy was like purple-black lightning, centered on Garp's fist and spreading out in all directions. The terrifying purple-black lightning seemed to block out the sky, making the sky a little darker. The terrifying air waves were like hurricanes, stirring up huge waves on the originally calm sea. Even if Luffy and Yuta were standing on the shore hundreds of meters away, they were shaken by the strong wind. Then, Garp's body shape changed, he clenched his fist and dived down. Unparalleled powerful pressure suddenly erupted, and terrifying energy flowed from top to bottom, seeming to sweep across the entire sea. Purple-black lightning ripped through the air, emitting bursts of terrifying explosions, falling to the bottom of the sea. Then Garp roared in the air. The whole person was like a god descending to earth, carrying a shocking power, and hit the sea with a punch that seemed to tear the world apart. The moment Garp was about to touch the sea, it seemed as if there was an invisible barrier cutting him off. Suddenly, the entire sea was like hundreds of dragons coming out of the sea, setting off huge waves. Within the range of Garp's attack, the sea sank downwards, forming a bottomless hole with no visible edges and no bottom. Luffy and Yuta were completely shocked when they saw such a scene. Such terrifying power is really beyond what they can imagine now. But Luffy was more surprised. Because, your understanding is heaven-defying, realized through personal visualization, comprehending, Conqueror's Haki entanglement. Garp has returned to Luffy and is now baring his front teeth and smiling proudly with his hands on his hips. How's it going, Luffy? I'm pretty good at this, right? As long as you agree to become a marine with me, I will teach you this trick. Luffy did not answer immediately, but walked to the shore, facing the sea, and spoke calmly. Let me try it first. As soon as he finished speaking, Luffy clenched his fists to gather energy. In the blink of an eye, a torrent of energy began to flow out of his body. Substantial purple-black lightning tore through the air and gathered between his fist and the heaven and earth, covering a distance of nearly 100 meters. Immediately afterwards, Luffy punched out in the air. The terrifying energy exploded and roared, and the lightning encircled the air waves, as if forming a transparent purple-black electric ball. The electric ball exploded suddenly, and a majestic shock wave blasted out from the sea like a cannon. Immediately, wherever the shock waves swept over, seawater poured crazily to both sides. In the end, a huge ravine several meters deep and hundreds of meters long was left on the sea surface. Luffy was very satisfied with the destruction he caused. His current haki is not even close to that of Garp. To be able to achieve this level is already extremely outstanding. Garp was extremely satisfied with Luffy's performance, nodded repeatedly, and continued to speak proudly. Now you see how powerful my move is, right? Conqueror's Haki is a unique skill that only a few people can master. As long as you come back to Naval Headquarters with me, I promise to teach you this trick. Luffy said nothing, just turned back and stared at Garp quietly. Garp was immersed in the fantasy of the devil training Luffy, when suddenly he was shocked and froze in place. For a moment, the air became extremely quiet. Ah! The next second, Garp held his head in his hands, dragged his chin to the ground, his eyes popped out, looking at Luffy as if he had seen a ghost, and shouted in disbelief. Although Yuta is not as exaggerated as Garp, he is still shocked by Luffy's heaven-defying learning ability. I learned it just by watching it once. This talent is so terrifying. Although Luffy instantly mastered Conqueror's Haki with heaven-defying comprehension, there is still a big difference between actual combat application and using the skill out of thin air. So Luffy squeezed Garp again and wanted him to be his sparring partner. Old man, let's have a fight. He deliberately called Garp old man because he wanted Garp to fight him. Sure enough, Garp immediately became angry when he heard Luffy's disrespectful tone. He immediately grinned, rolled up his sleeves, and said angrily, "You idiot, I think you have forgotten the power of Grandpa's iron fist." Garp certainly knew about Luffy's little thoughts, but he didn't reveal them. This may be one of the few things he can do for Luffy, so just be a good sparring partner. Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through personal combat experience, your armament hockey has been improved. Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through personal combat experience, your observation hockey has been improved. Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through personal combat experience, your courage has been improved. Your courage is increased, and your conqueror's hockey is strengthened. Time passed by and it was already 2 months later when the three of them left the island. For the past 2 months, Luffy's life has been eating, sleeping, and getting beaten. However, despite being beaten every day, Luffy is happy every day. His strength increased by leaps and bounds during this period, even more than he had grown by practicing alone for 2 years. This also has a lot to do with his sparring partner. As the top expert in the world, Garp would naturally gain far more from fighting someone of this level than he would otherwise. Moreover, Garp has Conqueror's Haki, and Luffy also discovered that when fighting an opponent with Conqueror's Haki, his Conqueror's Haki will also be improved due to heaven-defying comprehension. So much so that his current Conqueror's Haki strength has more than doubled compared to before. In terms of physical fitness, he also gained a lot. Even the 8 inner gates, he successfully broke through during this period and was able to open to the 6th gate. Luffy is confident that his current strength is almost enough to go to sea, and has even surpassed the Colonel Garp sometimes brought to naval headquarters. If you open the 8 inner gates again, you can even compete with some weaker Commodores. But training only goes so far. Garp has a mission after all, and being able to spare time to train with him for 2 months is already the limit. Back at Windmill Village, Garp did not let Luffy stay in the village anymore. Instead, they took him and Yuta to Gorbo Mountain, deep in the forest behind the village. Boom, 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 a wooden house on the top of the Gorbo Mountains was banged on. It's so noisy. Who is risking his life? A woman with orange hair and a fat body rushed out of the wooden house. The woman was smoking a cigarette and roared impatiently. Luffy also knows this person. He is the bandit Dayton raised by him and Ace in the original Vice Admiral. "It's me," Garp responded calmly. After seeing the person clearly, Dayton was immediately frightened and backed away, with a long line of snot dripping from his nose, and he exclaimed, "Card, Mr. Garp, do you look in good spirits? Stop joking, I beg you to spare us. That guy Ace is already 10 years old." Hearing Dayton mention Ace, Garp suddenly became interested. Really, he's grown so big. How is he doing? At this time, another bandit who heard the noise and came over complained, "We are almost helpless against him, please take him back quickly." Garp ignored the complaining bandit and changed the subject. Compared to those. With that said, Garp pushed Luffy and Yuta in front of him. "Please take care of these 2 guys too." When several bandits heard this, they were stunned. Kindness. Garp patted Luffy and said, "Come on, Luffy, Yuta, say hello." "Yo, hello." Luffy and Yuta briefly waved. The bandits were still confused, and one of them asked, "Who are these 2 brats?" "They are my grandson and granddaughter-in-law." Garp picked his nose with his fingers and said shamelessly. Yuta in front of him turned back and gave him a puzzled expression. In response, Garp turned his head to the side and pretended not to see it. The bandits were shocked when they heard the news. 2 more, Garps, no, Mr. Garp's grandson. After a while, several bandits knelt down at the same time, shook their heads, and said in unison, "Can't afford it." Garp seemed to have expected it, crossed his arms and said, "Then you choose, whether you want to spend your life in prison or you have to raise these 2 guys. I have always pretended to turn a blind eye to the countless sins you have committed." Ha 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 ha. Faced with Garp's intimidation, Dayton's group dared not speak out in anger. At this moment, Luffy suddenly noticed something flying towards him from behind and above. After seeing, hearing, and sensing, he tilted his head and dodged it. But upon closer inspection, what fell on the ground was a ball of saliva. Looking back, I saw a young man with a little bit of Madara on his face, with his arms crossed and a huge wild boar sitting under his butt. Ace. Luffy didn't take Ace's sneak attack seriously. But Yuta, who didn't know Ace, was different. She immediately defended Luffy. Hey, you guy, why did you spit on Luffy? Apologize. Ace ignored Yuta, but stared directly at Luffy, his eyes full of horror and confusion. He couldn't figure out why the child in front of him easily dodged the spit he spat from behind. Is it a coincidence? Ace doesn't know anything about hockey now, so he just thinks that Luffy's hiding was a coincidence. At this time, Garp also saw Ace behind him, and suddenly shouted in surprise. Ace, Luffy, that guy is Ace. He's 3 years older than you and 1 year older than Yuta. From today on, you will live with him. Get along well. The bandit behind him immediately started questioning after hearing this. Have you decided yet? I saw Garp tilt his head, his eyes focused, and his aura was calm and intimidating, which frightened several bandits to stand at attention. Yes, then we will accept it. Okay, that's all. I will come again when I have time. With these words, Garp left. Chapter 11. A few days later, the Dayton family. Luffy was sitting by the wall, holding a huge piece of animal meat in his hand and chewing on it. Next to him was Yuta, who looked very competitive. Across from them, Ace was holding his fists and grinning, looking unconvinced. The other bandits consciously arranged themselves around, watching quietly, not daring to disturb. I'm going to fight you. Ace pointed at Luffy and said unconvinced. In the past few days that Luffy has been here, he has been able to catch prey that is more powerful than him every day. This makes Luffy's status in the Dayton family rise rapidly. Until today, Luffy actually dragged back the tiger that Ace had been unable to defeat. This made Ace, who had always been arrogant, completely unable to sit still. He wanted to propose a duel with Luffy on the spot to prove that he was better than Luffy. But now Luffy can't compare to sparring with Ace. It's like hitting mosquitoes with a cannon. There is no comparison at all. So, he pushed out Yuta, who had always been dissatisfied with Ace. During this time, Ace's bad attitude towards the two of them had already angered Yuta. Although she has no interest in fighting, she will never let anyone bully her. If you can beat Yuta, I will fight you. Luffy responded calmly. Yuta went to sea with Shanks for 7 years, and trained with him and Garp for several months. Her strength is no worse than Ace's now. But Ace didn't think so. When he saw Luffy pushing out a girl, he thought the other girl looked down on him, and he immediately became angrier. You guy, but since you are challenging the other party, you must follow the other party's rules. In the end, he did as Luffy said and fought with Yuta first. A few days later again. In front of the Dayton family. Ace and Yuta went back and forth, and finally after several hours of evenly matched battle, Yuta was the first to lose strength and fall down. Ha. Ace gasped for air, hunched over tiredly, looked at Luffy who was taking care of Yuta, and then said breathlessly. I've defeated her. Next, you should duel with me, right? Luffy glanced at Ace and couldn't help but sigh. Ace's talent is still better than Yuta's. The two men fought in a deadlock at the beginning. But after several days of evenly matched sparring, Ace finally took the lead and surpassed Yuta. Looking at Ace with fighting spirit in his eyes, Luffy nodded. Wait until you recover. Finally, after receiving Luffy's promised reply, Ace fell back with a sigh of relief. 3 days later, in front of Dayton's family. Ace clenched his fists, his eyes full of fighting spirit. Opposite him, Luffy's face was calm and unruffled. Dayton and his gang sat excitedly under the wall, waiting to watch the battle of the century. They have never seen Luffy take action, but Luffy can bring back powerful prey, so his strength is definitely not weak. Ace's strength has always been very strong in everyone's mind, especially after defeating Yuta, who was also not weak 3 days ago. Therefore, they have long been looking forward to today's battle of the century. Today, the first battle force of the Dayton family will be decided. When Dayton's group was full of expectations, Yuta, who was standing next to them, raised his right hand high and then lowered it. Start. Following Yuta's order, Ace immediately let out a majestic roar, clenched his fist and rushed towards Luffy. Seeing this powerful momentum, the Dayton family nodded repeatedly, their eyes full of appreciation. They turned to look at Luffy again, and all of them shook their heads. Luffy was seen facing the menacing Ace, but he still looked unhurried and seemed to have no will to fight at all. How could it be possible to defeat Ace in such a state? The bandits thought so in their hearts. Suddenly, each of them felt as if they had seen a ghost. Their mouths opened wide, their chins dropped to the ground, and their eyes seemed to explode. He looked at Ace lying on the ground in disbelief, with shock written all over his face. They clearly saw just now that Luffy just punched casually and the duel was over. Is the not over? It looks like it is. Ace, is he okay? At this moment, Ace was lying on the ground motionless, his eyes filled with disbelief. He never imagined that there was such a big gap between him and Luffy. He thought he would lose, but he never thought he would lose so hard. At this moment, a bright smiling face appeared in his sight. Ace, do you want to become stronger? Looking at Luffy with a kind face and bright smile, Ace wondered. What's the meaning? Luffy smiled. I can help you train and become stronger. From now on, let's get along well. With that said, Luffy stretched out his hand towards Ace. Ace looked at Luffy with extremely complicated eyes. He didn't understand why he had such a bad attitude towards this guy, but he still didn't mind at all, and now he said he wanted to help him become stronger. But seeing the sincere look on Luffy's face, Ace finally raised his trembling right hand with difficulty and held it with Luffy. He and Luffy had no grudges, and the reason for his previous bad attitude was largely due to his dissatisfaction. Now that he has realized the gap between the two sides, he has let it go. Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through personal combat experience, your courage has been improved. Your courage is increased, and your conqueror's haki is strengthened. The sudden reminder in his mind surprised Luffy. He didn't expect that fighting Ace could also improve conqueror's haki. It seems that as long as the opponent has conqueror's qualifications, he can be improved regardless of whether he is awakened or not. Luffy made a judgment in his mind. However, he felt that the improvement he got from Ace was much less than that from Garp. It seems that the increased strength is related to whether the opponent has awakened or not, and the strength of the opponent's conquerors. However, Luffy is still very satisfied with the promotion. Ace took Luffy and Yuta to a giant tree. Sabo, are you there? Sabo. Ace made a trumpet shape with his hand and shouted toward the giant tree. Soon, several people saw a young man wearing a blue hat sticking his head out and saying, "What have you been doing these days, Ace?" "I've done quite a few jobs in the past few days." Suddenly, Sabo noticed two strange people standing next to Ace, and he suddenly became wary. This is where they hide their treasures, and they cannot be discovered by outsiders. Who are these two guys? Luffy then introduced himself with a smile. Yo, I'm Luffy and this is Yuta. Sabo looked confused and asked Ace. What the hell, Ace? Ace scratched his head. Well, it's hard to explain this matter. Anyway, come down first and I'll tell you slowly. Tens of minutes later. What, you said Luffy knocked you down with one punch? Sabo exclaimed with a shocked look on his face. Careless. I've been told that I was careless. You guys, do you listen carefully to what others say? Ace grinned angrily and argued unconvinced. Ha. I didn't expect Ace to be taught a lesson by others one day. Ha. Sabo didn't listen to Ace's excuse at all, slapping his thigh and laughing. Boom. At this moment, Ace suddenly hit Sabo on the head with an angry fist, immediately stopping Sabo's laughter. If he can't beat Luffy, he can't beat Sabo. Sabo held his head in pain and looked at Ace. Ace crossed his arms and tilted his head proudly. Snort. After Ace's introduction, Luffy also officially met Sabo. In the days that followed, a few people lived a life of either competing with each other or going to the waste terminal to rob the treasures of robbers and criminals. However, after sparring with Ace a few times, Luffy could no longer improve Conqueror's haki from him. Ace's Conquerors has not yet awakened, and the limit of improvement is still too low. Waste terminal. I made a lot of money this time. Mr. Borshami is right. As soon as the greedy businessman heard about the Grand Line's treasure, his expression changed drastically and he rushed out. Actually, it's all garbage floating to the beach. Ha. The two men were laughing and joking about the treasure they had just snatched from a certain businessman. At this time, they suddenly noticed two short figures appearing in the faint mist ahead. When the two of them continued to move forward and wanted to find out what was going on, two figures jumped up at the same time, and the steel pipe in their hands fell down, hitting their heads heavily. After a while, Ace and Sabo excitedly held the newly acquired treasures and sighed with excitement. This harvest looks quite big. It's a bag full. Yes, we are one step closer to our dream. The two left leisurely. Little did they know that someone had noticed them secretly. Middle forest. Sabo was sleeping alone on the top of a giant tree when he suddenly heard the sound of someone communicating nearby. Ace and Sabo, they are famous brats around here. They were the ones who snatched the treasure from you last time, right? The tall Jamie asked the man next to him whose treasure was robbed by Ace and Sabo last time. One of them replied, "Yes, I'm really ashamed. I was so careless at the time." Burjime looked angry. "You are so bold, you dare to touch our pirate group's money." As he spoke, he asked another person next to him. "The last time you followed them was around here, right?" "Yes, I saw them come here with my own eyes." Hearing the conversation coming from below, Sabo was already breaking out in a cold sweat. If this group of people were allowed to search here, their treasure would definitely be discovered. In desperation, Sabo jumped up and ran away. The sudden movement immediately attracted Burjime and others. "Hurry up. The Dayton family, Luffy and others were still sleeping soundly. The door was suddenly pushed open. "Something's bad, Luffy." The sound woke everyone in the house. Luffy slowly opened his blurry eyes and saw Ace standing at the door, looking terrified and his eyes full of worry. "What's wrong, Ace?" Ace rushed to Luffy, handed him a note, and said at the same time, "When I went to find Sabo this morning, I found this note nearby." Luffy took the note and wrote on it, "We have Sabo in our hands. If you want to save people, come with all your treasures. Mr. Blue and his gang." Mr. Blue 5, Luffy muttered. He seemed to have heard this name before. Blue Mr. 5 is the captain of the Sapphire Pirates. Because they pay tribute to the kingdom, they have never been bound by the law. If Sabo falls into their hands, he will definitely be killed. Ace said worriedly from the side. Luffy also recalled that this Blue Mr. 5 was the pirate who forced Ace to awaken conquerors in the original book. Thinking of this, Luffy suddenly had an idea. Maybe he could use this Blue Mr. 5 to let Ace awaken conquerors, and he would teach him from the side. This would not only improve Ace's strength, but also allow him to practice with Ace later and improve his conqueror's haki. Thinking of this, Luffy said to Ace, "Ace, you have been training for so long, it's okay to give you the task of saving Sabo, right? Let's go. I will observe in secret, and if you can't do it, I will take action." Ace was stunned for a moment, and then he was full of fighting spirit. "I will definitely rescue Sabo." Waste terminal, on a pirate ship on the coast. Sabo was tied to a pillar, and Borjami kept punching him. At this moment, Sabo was covered in blood, in a trance, and looked extremely weak. Still unwilling to tell, "Kid, tell us the whereabouts of the treasure and Ace quickly, and you won't have to suffer this." Sabo's breath was weak, and he said in a weak voice, I won't tell you. Besides, your fist is much weaker than Ace's." Hearing this, Borjami was furious, and he waved his fist at Sabo again with his teeth bared. Bang! At this moment, a small figure suddenly jumped onto the deck. "Stop!" Ace held a steel pipe, and his expression suddenly changed when he saw Sabo's appearance, and his face was suddenly full of anger. Seeing Ace appear, Borjami's fist stopped. The other pirates also cast their eyes, full of amusement. "How is it, did you bring the treasure?" When asking, Borjami suddenly noticed that Ace was empty-handed, and frowned immediately. "Are you looking for death? You dare not bring the treasure you robbed us." When Mr. Blue saw Ace appear, a smile appeared on his face. But when he learned that Ace did not bring the treasure, he was completely covered by murderous intent. "Borjami," Mr. Blue called out in a low voice. Borjami immediately understood, clenched his fists, and walked towards Ace. The two quickly entered the fighting state. After more than a dozen rounds of confrontation, Ace finally found the right opportunity, seized Borjami's gap, and gave a heavy blow. Soon, he won the victory with the upper hand. "Oh, you are quite capable." Mr. Blue was very surprised, but also interested at the same time. slowly stood up from the chair and walked towards Ace. There was no time to rest. Ace joined the battle again. Bang! Ace, who was covered in wounds, was kicked to the ground by Mr. Blue 5, and then stepped on heavily. If you hadn't dared to rob my treasure, I would have wanted to take you as my subordinates. Now, tell me where the treasure is. Otherwise, you two little ghosts will die here today. Ace's face was stepped on by Mr. Blue 5, but he still had an unyielding attitude. Don't dream, those are our treasures, we will never tell you. Asshole little ghost. Unexpectedly, this Ace is also a guy who is as stubborn as Sabo, which ignited Mr. Blue's anger again. He looked at a subordinate beside him and nodded to him. Then he showed a sinister smirk and said, "If you don't say anything, I will kill your partner first." Look at him, he is already dying. Ace looked at Sabo worriedly, but still kept his mouth shut. He knew Luffy was nearby and would definitely save Ace. At this moment, behind the cabin behind the deck, Yuta whispered with a worried look on his face. Luffy, if you don't take action, Sabo will be killed. No hurry. Luffy sat quietly on the ground, and his observation haki could let him know everything about the current situation. He was confident that he could save Sabo at the last moment, so he was not in a hurry but wanted to force Ace again. Because conquerors usually awaken when they want to do something very much, so he has to wait until the last moment and give Ace some time. On the deck, Blue Mr. 5 asked again. Why, you still don't want to say it? Ace gritted his teeth, his thoughts were extremely confused. He was wondering why Luffy hadn't appeared yet, and he was also worried whether Luffy was not nearby, and he was even more worried about Sabo's safety. At this time, Blue Mr. 5 completely lost his patience and glanced at the subordinate with the knife. Do it. The subordinate raised the big knife in his hand and aimed at the dying Sabo. Seeing this scene, Ace became even more flustered. Nervousness, worry, doubt, anger, all kinds of emotions filled his mind. His body was also soaked with sweat. Seeing the big knife getting closer and closer to Sabo's head, Ace's emotions were magnified to the extreme at this moment. There was only one thought in his mind. Stop, Ace roared. Suddenly, an astonishing momentum suddenly erupted from him. All the pirates around were instantly filled with fear. The next moment, except for Mr. Blue 5, all the pirates on the scene rolled their eyes and fell to the ground. At this time, Luffy, who was hiding in the dark, slowly raised the corner of his mouth. Finally, Ace's conquerors awakened. Seeing all the boys around him suddenly fall to the ground, Mr. Blue himself felt an inexplicable fear. This strange feeling suddenly made him frightened and angry. He looked at Ace lying on the ground in fear and anger, and asked, "What did you do, kid?" Ace had already lost his strength at this time, and could only vaguely look ahead, where Sabo was tied, and murmured his name. Sabo. Seeing this scene, Mr. Blue suddenly became furious and said in a deep voice with a ferocious face, "You brat, go to hell." At this moment, Mr. Blue suddenly heard the same words coming from behind, like the whisper of a devil. Go to hell. Mr. Blue was shocked when he heard this. The voice was only a few feet away from him, but he didn't feel any breath at all. When he looked back in panic, a sharp fist hit him in the face. He felt as if his head had exploded for a moment, and his consciousness completely disappeared. Ace, Sabo, let's be brothers, Luffy suddenly said at this time. His voice reached the ears of the two dying people. Both of them tried their best to smile. Middle forest. Luffy, Ace, and Sabo were surrounding a tree stump, each holding a bowl of wine in their hands. From today on, we are brothers. OX3. The three of them clinked their bowls together, drinking and sworn vows. Looking at each other and laughing. In the days that followed, several people resumed their previous lives. Practice and rob robbers. After Ace awakened conquerors, Luffy began to teach and sparring with him. Soon, Ace's strength far surpassed that of Sabo and Yuta, and Luffy's conquerors were also growing day by day. Until a few months later. Just like in the original work, Sabo's noble identity was exposed and he was captured by his father. Then, the celestial dragons came to inspect the kingdom of Goa. Sabo went to sea that day and was sunk by celestial dragons' artillery fire on the spot. When the news reached Dayton's house, Ace went berserk on the spot. He rushed out of the door like crazy, but was pushed to the ground by Dayton. Ah! Let me go, Dayton. I'm going to avenge Sabo. Dayton frowned. Although he was equally sad and angry in his heart, he still maintained his rationality and stopped him sternly. Don't do anything stupid. The other party is the Celestial Dragons. Even if you go, it won't help. You can only die in vain. Ace struggled desperately, then looked at Luffy again. Luffy, Sabo is our brother. We must avenge him. Help me take Dayton away. Faced with Ace's request for help, Luffy stood by Dayton this time, shook his head and said, Ace, Dayton is right. As we are now, there is no way we can deal with the Celestial Dragons. And I believe that Sabo will be fine. Defeating a Celestial Dragons is easy, but defeating the admirals attracted by Celestial Dragons is a fantasy. Moreover, on the day of Sabo's accident, Luffy was watching from a distance. He saw with his own eyes that Sabo was rescued by his father, Monkey D. Dragon, whom he had never met. That's why you can stay rational and not get carried away by anger. Ace suddenly became much calmer after hearing Luffy's words. Sabo, will he really be fine? Luffy nodded solemnly. The next day, Luffy and others received a letter sent by Sabo before leaving. Ace, Luffy, and Yuta, you weren't injured by the fire. Although I'm worried, I still believe you will be fine. After all, Luffy has always been so reliable. Although I'm sorry for you, when you read this letter, I will already be at sea. A lot happened, so I decided to head out to sea first. The destination is somewhere other than this country. There I will become stronger, become a pirate, and become a pirate who is freer than anyone else. Let us three brothers, and Yuta, meet again somewhere. Somewhere in the vast, free sea, we will meet again one day. Also, Ace, who is the older brother between you and me? I think it should be you. Speaking of which, are we two brothers incompetent at our jobs? We always have to take care of our younger brother Luffy. 2 older brothers and 1 younger brother. Although it is strange, this bond is my most cherished treasure. Luffy, this guy Ace has always been impulsive and likes to mess around. But he is our brother after all, so I'll leave it to you. Ace, you too, make sure to take good care of Luffy. Sabo. After reading the letter, Ace burst into tears. Yuta's face was stained with tears, and Luffy's eyes were also stained with tears. He looked up at the sky and said silently in his heart, we will definitely meet again, 3 brothers together. Time flew by and it was already 7 years later. Today is the day for Ace to go to sea. Windmill Village, on the coast. Luffy, Yuta, the Dayton family, Makino, the village chief and all the villagers came to see Ace off. People said goodbye to Ace one after another, saying heartwarming words or words that were tough on the outside but soft on the inside. After saying goodbye to everyone else, Luffy was the only one left. Ace's eyes were full of fighting spirit. Luffy, I will go to sea first. I will definitely become the freest pirate. The next time we meet again, I will definitely surpass you. At the end of the sentence, Ace's eyes suddenly softened and his tone became gentle. Bye, Luffy. Take care of Yuta. I'll wait for you somewhere on the ocean. Luffy smiled, with the same soft expression. See you on the sea. Take care, Ace. 3 years later. Same location, same scene, same group of people. You kid is finally going to be gone. He's been really annoying me all these years. Dayton said with special disgust, but his face was covered with tears and his eyes were full of reluctance. Luffy, take care of yourself and Yuta. Remember to cover yourself with a quilt when sleeping, and don't eat too fast. Makino gave instructions carefully one by one, tears uncontrollably overflowing from his eyes. Luffy, you want to be a big pirate. Luffy, you want to be the pride of Windmill Village. Luffy, we'll be following your news in the paper. The villagers and other bandits from the Dayton house bid farewell to Luffy and said blessings. Shut up, all of you. Why do you think you are pirates? This is simply an insult to the reputation of our Windmill Village. The village chief severely reprimanded the surrounding villagers, but he took out his handkerchief and wiped his tears. Luffy looked at these familiar and warm faces and felt moved in his heart. Dayton, Makino, the village chief, everyone. Thank you so much for taking care of me all this time. After saying this, Luffy bowed deeply to everyone. Yuta also followed Luffy's example and bowed to everyone. After Luffy and Yuta's boat sailed away, a series of wails broke out on the shore. East Blue, a certain sea area. A luxury cruise ship was slowly sailing on the calm sea. Inside the cruise ship, there were laughter, singing and dancing, and the atmosphere was peaceful. At this moment, the door of the cabin was slowly pushed open. The two figures standing at the door immediately attracted the attention of many people. They all looked extraordinary. Skoye, Luffy, I want to hold a concert here. The two people were Luffy and Yuta. Seeing such a cheerful and comfortable atmosphere in the cabin, Yuta's singing heart was instantly ignited. Well, you go. I'll go find something to eat first, my stomach is already flat. Luffy responded, and his eyes began to scan the venue. They have been floating on the sea for several days, and the food they brought has long been eaten up. The fish caught in the sea cannot be processed, so they have been hungry. Everyone, come and sing. With Luffy's consent, Yuta immediately became energetic and jumped to the central dance floor. The singing started, and immediately attracted countless fans. For Yuta, as long as she can bring joy to people with her singing, it is more important than anything else, and she can even forget about hunger temporarily. Accompanied by Yuta's beautiful singing, Luffy came to a bar and began to madly sweep up the buffet food on the table. This terrifying speed and eating style made the waiters and guests around terrified and dared not approach. Yuta, take a break and eat something. After Yuta finished singing a song, Luffy squeezed out a sentence from his full mouth. Okay, Yuta responded and greeted the fans she had just gained. Everyone, continue later. After she finished speaking, she jumped to Luffy and sat down. Bang! At this moment, a gunshot suddenly came from outside the cabin. Then, there was a chaotic fight, and occasionally the word, pirate, could be heard. Hearing that there were pirates, everyone in the cabin suddenly fell into panic and chaos, running around to avoid, and it was a mess. Luffy, Yuta was about to get up, but Luffy held him down. You continue eating, leave it to me. Standing up, Luffy grabbed a piece of meat bigger than his head and walked out while chewing. When he came to the deck, Luffy saw the pirate ship with a swan head next to the cruise ship. When he noticed the familiar pirate flag on the ship, Luffy couldn't help but recall. Isn't this the pirate ship of the pirate with a bounty of 5 million Baileys, the so-called Iron Rod, Alvida? So, Luffy touched his chin, and the corner of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. If nothing unexpected happened, then Nami should be hiding in a corner of the two ships at this moment. Luffy immediately turned on observation hotkey to explore. Soon, he locked onto a sneaky figure on the opposite pirate ship. But before that, Luffy glanced at Alvida's group, who had knocked down all the guards on the deck, and walked towards them. All the guards have been dealt with. Hurry up and search for valuable treasures on the ship. The fat and ugly Alvida waved an iron rod and commanded the pirates present. After giving the order, she moved her eyes to a trembling pink-haired boy beside her. Kobe, tell me, who is the most beautiful woman in this sea? Kobe shrank into a ball in fear and said tremblingly. Of course, Woa, do you want to be like her, or disappear from my sight now? Luffy said slowly. All the pirates were stunned for a moment, and then they scattered like lightning, jumped into the sea, and swam to the sea far away from here. At the same time, they kept shouting, Monster! Monster! Run! In the blink of an eye, only Luffy and the dazed Kobe were left on the deck. Luffy looked at Kobe, who was shocked and begged for mercy. Don't kill me, I was captured by them. To Kobe's surprise, this devil didn't seem to have any intention of killing him, but left a sentence. You are free now, do what you want to do. After leaving this sentence, Luffy jumped to the deck of the opposite pirate ship, leaving Kobe alone standing there, thinking about life. Hee hee hee, hee hee hee, hee hee hee. In a room on the Alvida pirate ship, Nami hummed happily, and quickly packed the treasures in the treasure chest with both hands. Those idiots, they must not have realized that their treasure house has been found by me, a treasure thief. Hee hee hee, I won't be polite, Nami whispered to herself, and laughed like a little thief. Hey, miss, a voice suddenly sounded behind her, and Nami's fur instantly stood up like a frightened kitten. While turning around suddenly, she did not forget to protect the treasures that she had just packed behind her. Who are you? Nami looked at Luffy, who was leaning against the doorframe warily, and was secretly surprised when this person came. She, a keen treasure thief, did not notice it at all. Luffy took a bite of the big piece of meat in his hand and answered vaguely. I am Luffy. The treasure you are stealing now is my trophy. Luffy pointed to the big bag hidden behind Nami. Just looking at the size of the bag, it was worth at least 5 million Baileys. As soon as she heard that Luffy was here for the treasure, Nami was immediately hostile to Luffy. This is my treasure. Really? Then let's solve it the pirate way. Let's have a fight. Whoever wins is the one who owns it. Luffy said casually. Immediately, the anger in Nami's eyes disappeared, and the speed of light turned into a harmless smile, waving her hands and saying, Hee hee, are you going to fight? We discovered it together, so let's divide the treasure equally. In fact, Nami's psychological activities at this moment. Nami gritted his teeth angrily, and kept spitting out his fangs. He ruined my good deeds. Who wants to share this treasure with you? You actually said you wanted to fight me. You look like you could kill me with one punch. What a hell. Don't let me meet you again in the future. If you meet me once, I will steal from you once. Faced with Nami's proposal to split the money equally, Luffy shook his head. I am a pirate, and pirates have no right to share with others. Hearing this, Nami's eyes suddenly flashed with disgust. What she hates most is pirates. But seeing that Luffy seemed to be alone, she was not so afraid and said, I discovered these treasures first, so it's natural for me to have a share, right? If you don't agree, then I'll scream. Attract those pirates back, and you won't get a penny by then. Nami brought out Alvida and her gang to intimidate Luffy. She was secretly happy that now Luffy must be scared and could only agree to split with her. Unexpectedly, Luffy said nonchalantly, Are you talking about Alvida? She has been beaten away by me, and all her brothers have also escaped. Quote. The air suddenly became eerily quiet. Nami seemed to have been pressed on the time pause button. Suddenly, as if the time start button was pressed, Nami exclaimed after recovering. What did you say? Alvida is a big pirate with a bounty of 5 million Baileys. You said you beat her away. Luffy did not answer this time. There is no need to repeat questions that have already been answered once. Nami also noticed at this time that the sound of fighting outside had indeed disappeared, and then believed Luffy's words. She couldn't help but glance at Luffy. He didn't look that strong compared to Alvida's size. How did you defeat Alvida? But doubts were doubts, and now she had to face reality. Nami forced out a fake smile, walked towards Luffy with the treasure in hand, and said with a smile. Hee hee, I was joking just now. Don't mind, Mr. Luffy. All these treasures are yours, and I don't want any of them. After handing the treasure to Luffy, Nami walked out the door, wanting to escape as soon as possible. But what shocked her was that when she was about to pass the door, Luffy stretched out a hand to stop her. Seeing that he was stopped by the guy who beat Alvida away, Nami suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Sure enough, this pirate didn't intend to let him go so easily. Nami cried in her heart, thinking that she might really be doomed this time. I'm sorry, Nokigao. Single quote. I'm sorry, Kensang. Single quote. Sorry, everyone. Single quote. I may not be able to buy back Kokoja village and save everyone. Are you Nami, the little thief cat? When Nami was thinking about her last words, Luffy's voice suddenly interrupted her. Nami stopped crying immediately after hearing this, looked at Luffy doubtfully, and asked, Why do you know about me? Luffy smiled and told the reason he made up. I heard from other pirates that there is a treasure thief who specializes in stealing pirate treasures. It should be you. Nami was stunned when she heard this. Could it be that the pirate group she had stolen from before came to seek revenge on this person? When I was confused, I listened to Luffy continue. I heard from those pirates that you are very talented in sailing. So, I would like to invite you to join my pirate team and be my navigator. Once he heard that the other party was not here to seek revenge, Nami's tense body immediately relaxed and he let out a sigh of relief. Her eyes were rolling, and then she looked Luffy up and down, and finally landed on the treasure she had just handed over to Luffy. This guy doesn't seem like the kind of person who is particularly cautious. He pretends to join him first and then steals the treasure while he's not paying attention. And since this guy is so strong, He must have collected a lot of treasures and will steal them together when the time comes. Hey, I'm going to make a lot of money now. Single quote. Nami snickered in her heart, glanced at Luffy, and couldn't help but secretly thought to herself. What a fool. They already knew I was a treasure thief and invited me on board. Single quote. Then I, this treasure thief, will teach you a lesson. Single quote. After a quick series of mental activities, Nami pretended to think about it, and then pretended to be reluctant and forced to speak. Oh, I'm so unwilling, but if I don't agree to your promise, you will definitely not let me go. In that case, Captain Luffy, I am Nami, please give me your advice. Nami stretched out her white right hand, her eyes twinkling with an unconcealable glint. Luffy smiled secretly in his heart. He saw through Nami's plan at a glance. However, he did not expose it, but accompanied Nami and acted out the scene. He reached out and held Nami's hand. Luffy, Captain, are you tired? Do you want me to help you get it? As soon as she joined Luffy, Nami, enthusiastically, followed Luffy's ass and said she would help Luffy get the treasure. Okay, Luffy smiled and gave the treasure to Nami, just because he was too lazy to take it. Anyway, even if she gave it to Nami, she couldn't take it away now. After leaving the room and coming to the deck, Nami looked around. Looking around, she only saw the Alvida pirate ship and the luxury cruise ship next door. She asked Luffy curiously, Captain, where is our pirate ship? Luffy pointed in a direction. There, Nami looked in the direction Luffy pointed and was stunned. If a luxury cruise ship is compared to a super sports car, then Alvida is a motorcycle, and their pirate ship, which Luffy said, is the wheel of a bicycle. Nami looked at the pirate ship that could only accommodate 4 people and was rowed by hand with an unbelievable look, and was stunned. She looked at Luffy with an expression that said, "Are you kidding me?" But when she saw Luffy nod to confirm, Nami was desperate. She just thought that Luffy was so powerful, he must have a lot of treasures. Now it seems that she was too naive. Captain, there are only 2 of us in our pirate group, right? Nami asked in a tone of despair. There is another person. I will take you to find her. It's a good opportunity to introduce her to you. After Luffy finished speaking, he swung his right hand and stretched out to the side of the cruise ship. Nami was shocked when she saw this scene, her eyes rolled back, and she fell into a daze. Just when she was still in a daze, she felt someone hugging her body. Then, the whole person flew out. When she reacted, she had already arrived on the deck of the cruise ship. You. Nami pointed at Luffy in horror, and couldn't say a complete sentence for a long time. You should have heard of devil fruit, right? I am a rubber man who ate rubber fruit. Luffy explained. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Luffy temporarily claimed that he ate rubber fruit. Devil fruit. Nami was stunned. Isn't that a legend? Could the legend be true? At this time, Yuta finished his meal and walked out of the cabin. Luffy, haven't the pirates been dealt with long ago? Why did you take so long? Although Yuta was in the cabin, he had mastered observation haki under Luffy's teaching. So he knew that Luffy had dealt with the pirates a long time ago. As for what Luffy said to Nami when he was together, she couldn't hear it. Luffy said, Yuta, let me introduce you, this is Nami, the navigator I just found. Nami, this is Yuta, the musician of our pirate group. Yuta also reacted at this time and knew why Luffy had dragged on for so long. Then he took the initiative to greet Nami. After the 2 girls got to know each other briefly, Luffy suddenly interrupted and asked Nami. By the way, is there a pirate hunter named Roronoa Zoro nearby? When Nami heard the name of Zoro, she was shocked and couldn't help but think of the legends she heard from other pirates. Just thinking about it made her body tremble with fear. She looked nervous and described it vividly to Luffy. Yes, he is the most famous pirate hunter in this sea area. All pirates will be terrified when they hear his name. It is said that no pirate who fights with him can escape from his palm. He is a terrifying existence called Demon Beast. If any pirate group encounters him, they will surely die. At this point, Nami suddenly asked curiously. By the way, why are you asking that pirate hunter? Luffy responded lightly. Oh, I want to find him as our partner. Quote. The air became extremely quiet for a while. Nami seemed to be frozen in place again. A moment later, Nami hugged Luffy's thighs, looked at Luffy with tears in her eyes, and cried. Captain, I don't want to die yet, Captain. If we go to find that pirate hunter, we will definitely be killed. I still have dreams to realize, and I don't want to die so soon. Just find someone else as a partner, Captain. Luffy was very helpless when he saw this scene. Nami was indeed the cowardly trio. Yuta spoke for Luffy from the side. Nami, Luffy is very strong. Yuta's words calmed Nami down a bit. Thinking about Luffy alone, he beat the entire Alvida pirates and should not be weak. But if she faced the pirate hunter, she still had some doubts. After all, it was an existence called Magic Beast. Get up, Nami. Since you are already my crew member, I will definitely not let anything happen to you. Luffy looked down at the girl hugging his thigh and smiled. Nami was stunned for a moment when she heard Luffy's words. She didn't know why, but she felt that Luffy was very reliable. It seemed that with his guarantee, she would feel inexplicably at ease. Nami wiped her tears, let go of Luffy and stood up again. Luffy then continued to ask. Nami, do you know where the pirate hunter is now? I don't know. Nami shook her head. She didn't lie to Luffy because she was afraid to find Zoro, but she really didn't know. Luffy couldn't help but feel a little disappointed when he heard it. In this vast ocean, there is no map, where can he find it? I know. Just then, Luffy heard a voice suddenly coming from a certain direction on the deck. Looking in the direction of the sound, he couldn't help but be startled. He saw that Kobe had been standing in the same place since he left. At this time, Kobe was different from when he left. His expression became much more resolute. Your name is Luffy, right? I am Kobe. Thank you, Mr. Luffy. Your words made me understand what I want. I know where the pirate hunter is. I will take you to find him. On the rippling blue sea, the weather is sunny and the wind is gentle. A ship with a pink love pirate flag was moving slowly in a certain direction. Of course, it's not the Alvida pirates who are on the ship at the moment. But Luffy there was nothing he could do. His original little broken boat was too small, and it was also manual. So Luffy temporarily used the Alvida ship instead for a while. You can already see Shieldstown, Luffy. Yuta stood on the side of the boat, excitedly looking at the town in the distance, and said to Luffy. Luffy also came to the bow after hearing this. In the distance, you can see a huge tower with the words, 153, marked on it. This is Marine Branch 153 directly under East Blue. If I remember correctly, the person in charge of this branch seems to be the colonel named, Axeman, Monka. Luffy muttered as he searched for memories in his mind. This Menka is also a scumbag. A marine colonel acts like a mountain king, promoting tyranny and being self-centered. Now that we're here, let's help get rid of this scourge. Luffy thought to himself. After sailing for a while, Luffy and others officially landed in Shields Town. Luffy, what do we do next? Nami asked nervously. She was terrified when she thought that the pirate hunter was in this town. Just go find Zoro, Luffy said without hesitation. This made Nami's idea of finding a place to rest first and relieve her fear immediately break. It's okay, Nami. Luffy is here. Yuta comforted Nami gently. Nami looked at Yuta curiously after hearing this. She didn't know why Yuta trusted Luffy so much. But this kind of trust seemed to be contagious, and it also made her feel at ease. Hearing that Luffy wanted to go directly to Zoro, Kebi said from the side. Come with me, Mr. Luffy. Kebi led the way and explained to everyone. The pirate hunter offended the son of the colonel here some time ago, and is currently being held in the Marine Branch for execution. Under the leadership of Kebi, several people arrived in front of a wall soon. At this time, Kebi lowered his voice and said, Here we are, the pirate hunter is inside this wall. But we must be careful not to disturb Marine here. As soon as Kebi finished speaking, everyone saw Luffy stretching out his arms, grabbing the wall and jumping in. Quote exclamation mark. Quote. Nami and Kirby were immediately dumbfounded. They opened their mouths in horror, but they did not dare to make a sound and could only cry secretly in their hearts. Within the walls, there is an empty courtyard with a cross in the middle. Zoro is being tied to the cross, undergoing torture of exposure and starvation. Boom! Along with a dull sound of landing, a cloud of smoke rose up. Ahem. Zoro coughed twice, and then saw a man wearing a straw hat suddenly appeared in front of him. Where did you come from? Zoro complained, then showed a fierce look and said in a low voice. Who are you? If you don't want to die, get out of here. Luffy got straight to the point. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm here to find you to join my pirate crew. After hearing Luffy's words, Zoro couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth with a wicked smile. You guys, haven't you heard of my name? A pirate invited a pirate hunter to become a pirate. I think you're not awake yet. Luffy smiled lightly when he heard this. With Zoro's puzzled eyes, he turned to face the marine base where Monka lived. Then, Luffy gently raised his right foot, then lowered it and stomped it violently. Next moment, boom, suddenly there was a deafening roar from the ground. Immediately afterwards, the entire marine base fell into violent tremors, which lasted for several seconds. Ah! Zoro opened his mouth wide in shock, and could only make a continuous, ah, sound from his throat. He looked at Luffy in disbelief, and was shocked. How strong is this guy? One kick can cause the entire huge marine base to feel like an earthquake. After Luffy's kick, he stood there and waited. Soon, a steady stream of marines came out of marine base. Even Menka, his son Balloon and others couldn't sit still and came to check on the situation. Just 2 minutes, Luffy was surrounded by hundreds of marines pointing guns at him. Seeing this exaggerated scene, Zoro was dumbfounded. Nami and Kebi, who were lying on the wall and peeking, were also shocked. Nami even cried secretly. This guy is so impulsive. He attracted all the marines here. Yuta on the side said at this time. Luffy, he's not impulsive. But, he is too strong. The people here are not worthy of his caution. Nami and Kebi both turned their heads when they heard this and let out a light sigh. Inside the fence, Zoro was also frightened by Luffy's random behavior at this time, but when he saw the powerful marine, he immediately roared. Run away, they have already sentenced me to death. You don't have to die because of me. Luffy showed no signs of being surrounded by marine, but just looked at Zoro and said seriously. If you deal with them, then be my partner. At this moment, Zoro was stunned. He was deeply attracted by Luffy's extremely confident temperament. Mount Tai collapsed in front of us without changing his expression. How courageous is this? At this time, Zoro, who was still worried about Luffy, suddenly calmed down. How could someone with such confidence and courage lose? Zoro suddenly laughed and made a powerful sound from his throat. Oh, hearing that Zoro agreed to join the team, the corners of Luffy's lips also raised slightly. Sure enough, as long as you show strong strength and enough sincerity in front of Zoro, you can gain his appreciation and favor. But right now, Luffy turned around and faced all the marines. These miscellaneous fish must be dealt with first. Hey, who are you? Did you make that movement just now? Hurry up and surrender, a marine shouted, his tone obviously trembling. The huge movement just now was like an earthquake. If it was really the guy in front of them who did it, could they really beat him? As soon as the marine finished speaking, he suddenly felt a chill coming from his back. And through the shadow in front of him, we can see that there is obviously a tall figure on top of his original shadow, and he is holding a huge axe in his hand. Seeing this shadow, the marine was shocked and trembling as if he was electrocuted. Then, he heard a deep and angry voice coming from behind. Why do you feel afraid when you ask the enemy to surrender? Are you insulting the reputation of my axeman Menka by doing this? My men don't need cowardly soldiers like you. As soon as he finished speaking, the marine saw the shadow in front of him raising the giant axe in his hand and making a chopping motion. Immediately, the marine was so frightened that he closed his eyes. The long-term oppression made them forget to resist at all. In this case, just wait for death to come. All the marines around him couldn't bear to look at this scene, and they all felt sad and angry, but remained indifferent. Colonel Menka is too strong. Anyone who dares to anger him will die. This is the sentiment of all marines. So in the face of this situation, they can only turn a blind eye. What's that Colonel Marine going to do? Isn't that their companion? What's going on with this marine? The 3 people lying on the wall became confused when they saw this scene. What a pedantic army. Zoro couldn't help but sigh. At this moment, Luffy suddenly threw out his right hand. The rubber-like stretched arms reached Menka's eyes in an instant. Before he could react, Luffy grabbed him by the neck and threw him over. This sudden scene completely shocked everyone present. Zoro was once again shocked and said with his mouth wide open, "You the legendary son of the devil." He had only heard before that there was a fruit in the sea that could turn a person into a son of the devil if eaten, but this was the first time he had seen it. Marines sighed. Then, what happened to that guy? Why are the arms so long? With such amazing strength and speed, I caught Colonel Menka in one go. What are you idiots doing? That guy captured my dad, hurry up and shoot to save my dad. When the Marines were shocked by Luffy's ability, Balloon was the first to react and save Monka. Suddenly, all Marines stopped talking. But to Balloon's surprise, none of these Marines took action. Instead, they looked at each other, their eyes full of hesitation and expectation. In the hearts of these Marines, they sincerely hope that Monka's rule will end. That's why he was hesitant at this moment, wanting Luffy to end Menka's rule. On Menka's side, after being caught by Luffy, he still looked like a dead duck and roared angrily. Do you know what you're doing? Do you think you can defeat me by catching me here? Don't underestimate me, I'm an Axeman. Boom. Just as Menka was talking, his head was pressed into the soil, and the steel protective gear on his mouth exploded instantly, creating a deep pit of more than 10 centimeters on the ground. The whole person was beyond recognition and lost consciousness in an instant. Seeing this scene, the whole audience was dumbfounded again. Among the three people on the wall, Nami and Kebi's eyes were about to pop out, and their mouths were open enough to eat 3 pigs. Mr. Luffy is so strong. That guy, is he ridiculously strong? That's Colonel Marine. When the two of them sighed, they had their own calculations in their hearts. Kirby was inspired by Luffy and wanted to become a Marine Admiral. Nami couldn't help but wonder if it was Luffy who could defeat Arlong and save Kokoja village. Zoro was also deeply shocked by Luffy's strength. At least he himself would never be able to defeat Menka so easily. As for Marine, after a moment of shock and daze. Sudden, very good, we are free, no need to accept Menka's instructions anymore. Long live Marine. The Marines threw away their guns and knives and cheered to celebrate this moment of liberation. Watching this scene, the trio on the wall looked confused and puzzled. They didn't understand what was going on with Marine here. It's not over yet. At this time, Luffy suddenly sneered and threw out his arm again. The next second, a guy with a chin like a butt was caught by him. It is Menka's son, Balloon. Zoro, this is the guy who tied you up here and said he was going to kill you, right? Zoro raised his eyes and glanced at Balloon. This guy was scared to death at this time, with snot and tears streaming down his face, and his body was shaking non-stop. That's right, this guy. But forget it, I'm not interested in bullying guys who don't have the will to fight. Luffy smiled when he heard this. Sure enough, it was just as he thought. Zoro doesn't care about this kind of trash. But the reason why he knew it and still did it was. Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through personal visualization and perception of transmission, your courage as a conductor will be improved. Your conductor spirit has been improved, and the awakening of Conqueror's Haki has been accelerated. This is a new skill that Luffy accidentally awakened a year ago, perception transmission. Intelligence transmission. You can give anything you use for enlightenment to the conductor. The popular explanation is that as long as Luffy activates this ability on a certain person, he can temporarily possess Luffy's perception ability, and can even directly pass on Luffy's understanding of some things to the other person. At that time, Luffy's Conqueror's Haki seemed to have broken through a certain limit after being strengthened again, and this ability was immediately awakened. The understanding from playing games in his previous life is that after his heaven-defying comprehension ability has improved to a certain level, he unlocks new skills. And now, after he applied this ability to Zoro, it gave him an improvement in this moment of showing his courage, thus accelerating the awakening of Conqueror's Haki. In other words, when Zoro's courage increases more and more, he may awaken Conqueror's Haki without even facing a desperate situation. How strange. Zoro, who was tied to the cross, suddenly looked confused and muttered. For a moment just now, he suddenly seemed to feel a particularly deep power hidden within his body. But just for a moment, this feeling disappeared. Luffy noticed Zoro's doubts, but didn't say much. When he awakens later, he will know what that power is. Throwing the frightened balloon beside, Luffy untied the rope for Zoro. Zoro, who had regained his freedom, did not rush to find the sword that was taken away by Balloomber, but looked at Luffy and said solemnly, "Luffy, I don't care what people in this world think of me. I will only act according to my own beliefs and will never regret it. It will be the same now and in the future. I have something I must accomplish and become the world's greatest swordsman. I will always work hard for this goal. So Luffy, what's your realization? If your consciousness cannot match mine, then one day in the future, I will definitely choose to leave you for this goal. Even if that's the case, do you still want me to be your partner?" After Zoro finished speaking, he stared at Luffy without blinking. He has a good impression of Luffy, so he has expectations in his heart, hoping that the two of them can have the same great enlightenment. Luffy smiled faintly after hearing his words and said, "I have only one goal, and that is One Piece." "Yeah." The corners of Zoro's mouth raised, and he suddenly said seriously, "Roronoa Zoro, the swordsman. Please take good care of me. Captain." Luffy also raised the corner of his mouth when he saw this and said, "Monkey D. Luffy, welcome." On the fence. Is it a lie? That pirate hunter actually joined. Oops, will he chop us all up while we are sleeping? Nami sighed in surprise at first, and then thought about the future crisis. When Kirby saw this scene, he was once again infected by Luffy. As expected of Mr. Luffy, he even conquered the pirate hunters. Yuta looked at Luffy's expression and smiled slightly. Luffy, he is very happy. Marine base, Monka's office. Nami slipped in excitedly and rummaged through the room until he found a safe in the corner, and his eyes suddenly lit up. Found it, found it. Nami ran over excitedly, and Nami squatted down and started doing her job. He muttered while picking the lock. "I have long heard that there is a Grand Line nautical chart hidden in this marine base. If you can steal it, you will definitely be able to sell it for a lot of money." He. Nami thought happily. Click. At this time, she finally pried open the lock of the box. However, to her great disappointment, there was only a piece of paper inside. It says the chart was accepted by my uncle. Below this line of words, there is also a skull pattern with a red nose. Tisk. It seems the chart has been stolen. Yes, this sign seems to belong to that clown Buggy and his gang. That fool dared to steal the treasure that I was interested in. Nami subconsciously continued what he said before, then suddenly realized something and turned around in horror. She saw Luffy, Yuta and Zoro, who had recovered 3 knives, staring at her. Nami was startled, stepped back unconsciously, and sat down on the ground. "When did you?" Luffy laughed when he saw Nami's guilty and flustered look. "Nami, you knew there was a treasure here, why didn't you tell us?" Zoro followed up with a finishing blow. "You don't want to hide the treasure secretly and betray us at some point." Impressed by the 2 words, Nami immediately waved her hands in a panic and said with a stiff smile, Ha, how is it possible? How could I betray everyone? I wanted to make sure I got the treasure first and then tell everyone. Otherwise, everyone will be disappointed if the treasure is not found. You see now, isn't the treasure already snatched by others?" Luffy put his head close to Nami and stared at her suspiciously. "Oh, is it so?" Nami nodded like a fool, and the smile on her face became stiffer and stiffer due to being stared at by Luffy. It was almost like crying. At this time, Luffy suddenly withdrew his head and struck each other with his fists. "If that's the case, let's go get the chart back." Nami let out a sigh of relief when he heard this and thought to himself, "Fortunately the captain is a fool, otherwise the secret would have been exposed." After Nami and Yuta left the room first, Zoro suddenly became serious and said to Luffy, "Luffy, this woman is not trustworthy, don't be fooled by her appearance." To Zoro's surprise, Luffy smiled and nodded. "I know." At this time, Zoro also guessed that Luffy must have his own plan, so he said no more. As long as the captain is not deceived by appearances. News of Luffy's defeat of Monka soon spread to town. Suddenly, the entire town became like Marine back then, cheering and celebrating. "Very good. The tyrant has finally been defeated. Finally liberated. Let's have a party." I don't know who mentioned it, and the banquet immediately gained everyone's support. Luffy originally planned to sail directly to find Buggy. But when I heard there was a banquet, my heart moved. If pirates don't hold banquets, can they still be called pirates? So, Luffy decided to attend a banquet in Shieldstown. All the residents of the town gathered around the fire, sang, danced and toasted in celebration. Yuta took full advantage of her talents and held a concert happily. Luffy Zoro sat together, drank wine, ate meat, and talked freely. Nami sat next to him, watching this harmonious and beautiful scene and couldn't help but feel emotional. It would be great if it could continue like this. If you are with them, you will always be so happy, right? But everyone in Kokoja village. When she thought of Kokoja village, Nami couldn't help but feel sad and buried her head in her legs. At this time, the originally cheerful and lively celebration suddenly stopped, and Nami suddenly raised her head in confusion. I saw all the Marines, led by a captain, walking over and interrupting the banquet. The captain came directly to Luffy, saluted, and then said, "You are pirates, right?" Luffy Kaido, "Yes." The captain nodded upon hearing this, and then said sternly, "We're grateful though that you saved our base and the townspeople here. But, since you are pirates, we have to, please leave here for the sake of Marine's reputation." After the captain finished speaking, before Luffy and others said anything, the townspeople stood up angrily and started to accuse. "Hey, Marine, what the hell are you talking about? Are you kidding, or are you out of your mind? They are the benefactors of the whole town." Nami was stunned when she saw all the townspeople speaking up for them as pirates. Aren't pirates evil beings? Why are these people speaking for pirates like them now? Are there really beloved pirates? Nami couldn't help but look at Luffy with mixed emotions. At this time, Luffy suddenly stood up, and all the townspeople suddenly became quiet. Then, Luffy picked up the straw hat next to him and put it on his head, and said to Yuta and the others, "Okay, we should go." After hearing this, Yuta, Zoro, Nami and others stood up and came to Luffy's side. Seeing this, the townspeople wanted to persuade him to stay, but they saw Luffy smiling at them. "Thank you everyone for your hospitality." After saying that, Luffy led a few people towards the shore. Although they are kind to this town, the pirate marine has a different stance after all, and they are all full, so there is no need to stay. Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through personal experience, your courage is improved. Your courage is increased, and your conqueror's haki is strengthened. Your comprehensive strength has achieved a breakthrough. Finally, Luffy looked at the information in his mind and felt secretly happy. The reminder of strength breakthrough is a small function that he derived from his heaven-defying understanding based on his understanding of the pirate world's combat power in his previous life. It just makes him realize more clearly what level his current combat power is. His breakthrough this time was his successful promotion to the Naval Headquarters Vice Admiral level. However, his Vice Admiral level is an average. In other words, his current combat power has not really just entered the Vice Admiral threshold, but is already in the middle range of Vice Admiral combat power. Of course, the exception Garp is not included in the calculation. And one more important thing is, this combat power is only calculated based on abilities related to the world of pirates. Luffy's 8 inner gates are not included in the calculation because there is no way to compare them. Therefore, if Luffy does not open the 8 inner gates now, he is considered to be at the Vice Admiral level. And if 8 inner gates is turned on, he can definitely compete with the Admiral alternate. As for the 8 inner gates, Luffy is now able to open the 7th gate. The threshold for the 8th gate is still too high. It not only requires strong physical fitness, but also requires huge energy. For example, in the world of Hokage, this energy is chakra. And here, that energy is haki. Although Luffy has been practicing, his weapon color and knowledge color have been steadily improving. But the effect is definitely not as fast as fighting with others. As for Conqueror's haki, I have been staying in the small place of Windmill Village and encountered almost no events that can improve Conqueror's haki. Even though he could still improve by sparring with Ace, Ace's Conquerors only awakened when he was 10 years old, and he was not even a little weaker than him, so naturally the improvement effect would not be that great. So his current Conquerors is still a little far behind the top of the class like Garp Shanks. But now it's enough to get to the 7th gate. He doesn't have the ability to awaken the fruit yet, so he doesn't dare to use it even if he opens the 8th gate. So it doesn't affect anything. After sorting out his current strength and information, Luffy suddenly heard a voice coming from behind him. Wait, this guy, you guys are in the same group, right? It was the captain from before who spoke. At this time, he was pointing at Kebi, who was standing there blankly. Luffy knew everything when he saw it, heard it, and spoke without looking back. We don't know that guy. After saying that, he ignored the looks of the Marines and continued walking towards the coast. When the captain saw this, he didn't say anything even if he was thinking about it. Instead, he suddenly stood at attention and loudly announced an order. Everyone, salutes. After giving the order, hundreds of Marines immediately saluted Luffy and his gang to say goodbye, and Kirby was among them. Seeing this absurd scene, Nami struggled even more inside. Even Marine recognized this group of pirates, so would she still say that Luffy and the others were scum like the other pirates? Chapter 21. The Buggy Pirates currently reside on a small island called Orange Town. After Luffy and others left Shields Town, they headed towards Orange Town. Buggy has the Grand Line navigation chart in his hand, which Luffy must get. With the chart, he can know the distribution and location of each island so that he can go where he wants to go. Beyond that, Luffy actually has a purpose. That is to use Heaven-Defying understanding to learn from Buggy how to make special Buggy bombs. The special Buggy shells are extremely powerful, and when fired, they do not explode at the end like ordinary artillery shells, but act like shock waves, destroying everything along the way. Luffy still remembers that in the original book, a special Buggy bomb destroyed several streets of houses, and the explosion even spread from the island to near the coast. And 2 years later, Buggy improved it and turned it into a Maki cannonball that was still as powerful but only as small as a pea. And Buggy even used a Maki cannonball to seriously injure the jailer beast awakened by devil fruit in the deep-sea prison. If Luffy can learn this technique, he will definitely be able to make Maki cannonballs in advance. It is even possible to optimize it through Heaven-Defying understanding, making it more powerful and more versatile. When the time comes to use his improved Buggy bombs to arm the pirate ship and crew, the overall combat effectiveness will definitely be greatly improved. It takes a while to get to Orange Town. Luffy plans to start training Zoro during this period. On the deck of the Alvida pirate ship, Zoro was shirtless and training alone. After seeing Luffy's strength, Zoro was particularly diligent. We must match Luffy's combat power as soon as possible. Otherwise, I, the swordsman on the Pirate King's ship, would be derelict in my duties. Zoro gritted his teeth and felt sweat all over his body as he thought to himself. Stop for a moment, Zoro. Luffy came over at this time and interrupted Zoro's training. What's wrong, Luffy? What's wrong? Zoro looked confused, but listened to Luffy's words and paused temporarily. Luffy smiled and said, I'm going to teach you a brand new way of cultivation, and I'm going to teach you 2 new abilities. According to the training methods I teach you, your training efficiency will increase by more than 10 times. 10 times. Zoro's pupils dilated in shock, looked at Luffy in disbelief, and exclaimed. Seeing that Luffy didn't seem to be joking, his eyes started to shine with excitement and anticipation. At this time, Luffy said seriously, concentrate on feeling your mind, and then I will transmit the key points of extreme bodybuilding technique into your mind. Extreme exercise is a set of training methods that Luffy has accumulated over the years and summarized based on his own experience and Heaven-Defying understanding. This practice method can fully develop the body's potential through 3 dimensions: breathing, meditation, and daily training. Special breathing methods can be used to save energy to the greatest extent, or to activate the body's energy to the greatest extent. Simply put, it allows the user to increase endurance or increase burst. The training method is a set of methods developed by Luffy himself to maximize training efficiency, which can comprehensively improve physical fitness. Meditation is the bridge used to bring breathing and training together. Every breath and improvement brought by training can be combined and integrated through meditation. This is the principle of extreme exercise. If you master this training method, an ordinary person's training efficiency can be increased by more than 3 times. And with the blessing of Luffy's Heaven-Defying understanding, the efficiency can be maximized. Depending on each person's qualifications, the efficiency can be at least 10 times higher. Currently, apart from Luffy, only Yuta has mastered this method. No way, this was summed up when Luffy was 15 years old. Ace had already gone to sea for a year and didn't enjoy it. Although he didn't know what Luffy meant, Zoro followed the instructions seriously, closed his eyes, and carefully felt the world in his mind. At this moment, he suddenly felt that a stream of fresh blood began to pour into his mind from nowhere. At the same time, his mind was suddenly exposed to an extremely large amount of information. What makes Zoro feel amazing is that he is like a manager in charge of the entire mind at this time. All new and unknown information can be easily classified and summarized by him, making it particularly clear and easy to understand. And when Zoro understood the content of the new information, he was immediately completely shocked and attracted, and he was deeply obsessed with it. A few hours later, Zoro opened his eyes, and his eyes were filled with light, as if he was seeing a whole new world. This Luffy. He looked at Luffy in disbelief, his eyes full of shock and excitement, and he had thousands of words in his heart, which eventually turned into gratitude, and he said to Luffy, "Thanks." Luffy smiled and said, "You are my crew member, I teach you these things as you should. Besides, only when you become stronger can you help me better, right?" Zoro looked determined and full of momentum when he heard this. "Oh," Luffy continued, "okay, let me teach you the other two abilities, Haki." Seeing and hearing color and armament Haki are not difficult to master with the blessing of heaven-defying understanding. Luffy taught Zoro in just over half an hour. But Zoro's current grasp is that Luffy opened a door for him and gave him a first glimpse of the door. His current level is just that he has a consciousness and can roughly feel that power. It cannot be applied skillfully and the effect is not significant. If you want to improve, the most important thing is to practice a lot and practice. After opening up a new world for Zoro, Luffy let Zoro practice on his own. He turned on the understanding transmission beside him to improve Zoro's training efficiency. As for Nami, Luffy plans to wait until she fully and sincerely joins before training her. Orange Town, on the coast. Luffy and his party finally arrived after several days of sailing and landed on the island. It's strange, why does this town seem empty? As soon as he logged in, Yuta couldn't help but wonder. Looking around, the town of New Oda was empty, desolate, with no sign of anyone living at all. It must have been done by the pirate named Buggy the Clown. I heard that guy is a guy who likes to cause destruction. I'm afraid the residents of this town were scared away by him. Zoro talked about the information he knew. As a former bounty hunter, he naturally knew the pirates in this sea area well. Then, he remembered something and added something. If I remember correctly, that guy's bounty should be 15 million Baileys. What an exciting number. The corners of Zoro's mouth raised, his eyes full of fighting intent. The average bounty for the East Blue Pirates is only 3 million Baileys. It goes without saying what 15 million Baileys means. Zoro's strength has improved rapidly after practicing with Luffy's training methods in the past few days. This made him want to find someone to practice his skills with, and now he was inspired to fight. Nani, 15 million, isn't that? Nami exclaimed, her expression suddenly becoming panicked. I couldn't help but think of Arlong with a bounty of 20 million belly. In her eyes, Arlong is almost invincible. Only a little lower than that Arlong. How scary is this clown Buggy? Okay, let's go meet this clown Buggy. Luffy smiled. He still wanted to meet this guy who was rumored to have conqueror's luck. At this time, several figures suddenly walked out of a street. Just now, my subordinates reported that some unsightly bugs had sneaked in. It seems like they are you, right? One of them, who was riding a unicycle and putting his hands in his pockets, said. Luffy glanced at the people who came. They were Admiral Kabaji, Mochi and his pet lion Liqua, 2 members of Buggy the Clown. There are really people who are not afraid of death. Didn't you see the pirate flag we hung at the port? This is Lord Buggy's territory. Or, are you just here to die? Kabaji pulled out 2 knives and said with a playful expression. Luffy didn't say anything, just stood quietly. At this time, Zoro took a step forward and said. It's just a trash fish, not worth your while. Leave it to me, Captain. Zoro said this to Luffy and Yuta. In the past few days, Zoro's understanding of the world has changed greatly. Especially after coming into contact with the hockey field, he realized that there was such a powerful power in this world that was unknown to most people. This also made him realize that he was too weak now. And he simply can no longer care about an opponent of this level in front of him. He must cross this kind of miscellaneous fish as soon as possible. Luffy smiled when he heard this. He was just waiting for Zoro to realize this. Fighting is the fastest way to improve your strength. Such a suitable opponent is the best for Zoro now. Let's go. Luffy said something to Yuta and Nami, and walked towards a certain direction in the town. Yuta followed closely behind, while Nami was confused and worried. Don't you care about Zoro? As soon as Nami finished speaking, a person suddenly flew out from beside him. Kabaji held 2 knives and slashed at her hard. Ah! A sharp high-pitched female voice seemed to pierce the eardrums. Nami covered her head and remained motionless. When the crisp sound of weapons clashing sounded, Zoro held 2 swords and blocked Kabaji's attack. Your opponent is me. Escaped from life-threatening danger, Nami did not dare to stay any longer and quickly followed Luffy. The roof of a building on the island. You fool, who are you calling Red Nose? Wearing a red ball on his nose and dressed like a clown, Buggy was angrily questioning a subordinate in front of him. When the subordinate saw Buggy getting angry, he was so frightened that he trembled all over and said tremblingly, "Bah, Captain Buggy, what I'm talking about is that Mr. Kabaji and Mr. Mochi didn't seem to stop those pirates. They were walking towards here. They didn't say you were a red nose." The henchman finished speaking, and Buggy suddenly became angrier. You fool. How dare you call me a red nose? Buggy roared in a deep voice, then completely exploded in the last sentence. The surrounding men all looked horrified when they saw this scene. It's about to start. The power of that devil fruit. Buggy's hand suddenly broke off at the wrist, and he flew over out of thin air, grabbed the man's neck, and lifted him up. Tell me. Who am I? Bah, Captain Buggy. What will happen if you offend me? Wah, died gorgeously. I was wrong, Captain Buggy, I don't dare to say nonsense anymore. Boom. As soon as Buggy let go, the man fell to the ground. HMPH. Even if you said something wrong this time, I will forgive you. As soon as he finished speaking, Buggy tossed his cloak, turned around and walked towards the tent behind him. Yo, Red Nose. At this time, a voice suddenly came from behind Buggy who had just turned around. Buggy froze when he heard this, and all the pirates around him were trembling with fear. What on earth is? Buggy said in a deep voice, turned around suddenly and roared at the same time. Which fool is looking for death? Looking back, Buggy saw a man and 2 women standing opposite. The man was smiling and waving to him. One of the women was indifferent, the other nervous. Buggy, who was about to continue his anger, suddenly noticed the straw hat on the man's head and was stunned. Question. Where did that straw hat come from? Luffy took off his straw hat and said, This, Shanks gave it to me. Upon hearing Shanks' name, Buggy frowned and said angrily, It's really that fool. Boom. As soon as Buggy finished speaking, he was punched in the nose. He only felt a spin, and his body flew backwards uncontrollably. He hit the tent behind him and fell to the ground. Don't say anything bad about Shanks. Yuta gritted his teeth angrily. Ever since what happened to the bandit Sig, what she hates most now is people saying bad things about Shanks. But this scene made the surrounding pirates look dumbfounded. That woman actually knocked down Captain Buggy with just 1 punch. Hey, seriously, that's Captain Buggy. The big pirate with a bounty of 15 million Baileys. Who are they? Nami couldn't help but glance at Yuta, her eyes full of shock. She had never seen Yuta take action, and thought the latter was just a weak woman similar to her. But she never imagined that Yuta could knock down a 15 million belly pirate with 1 punch. At this time, she couldn't help but glance at Luffy, thinking to herself. How strong is this guy really? If it were him, could he beat Arlong? Yuta was just trying to teach Buggy a lesson, so he didn't use all his strength. In addition, Buggy's physical resistance to beatings is still very good, so after being knocked down, he was briefly dizzy and then regained consciousness. When Buggy woke up, he immediately reached out to touch his aching nose. When he saw the bright red bloodline on his hand, his eyes instantly filled with bloodshot eyes, and his expression became ferocious and angry. The Chop Chop Fruit ability is activated, and his body and legs are separated, giving him the ability to float. Floating from the ground, Buggy looked at the 3 strangers in front of him with great anger. The sight of the straw hat on Luffy's head was already enough to make him angry, but now that the red nose he cared about the most was injured, his heart was completely filled with anger. Facing Luffy and the others, he roared in a deep voice. You guys have completely pissed me off. Facing such an angry Buggy, Nami was immediately frightened and shrank behind Luffy, grabbing his shoulders and peeking in. He kept mumbling, it's over, that clown Buggy is really angry, and he's dead now. At this moment, Nami couldn't help but feel in her heart that she was worthy of being a great pirate with a bounty of 15 million belly. It was really terrifying. As for Buggy's younger brother, they were all trembling with fear and whispering. Captain Buggy, it's getting so scary. This is the first time I see Captain Buggy so angry. Those guys are dead this time, how dare they make Captain Buggy so angry? Who dared them to hurt Captain Buggy's red nose? That's what Captain Buggy cares about most. Hey, shut up, be careful not to be overheard by Captain Buggy. ... Hey, Red Nose, I have something to tell you. At this moment, when the pirates were discussing in low voices, they suddenly heard such a sentence. Suddenly, everyone stopped talking and their breathing stagnated, as if they were frozen in place. Their frightened pupils even shrank to a small point, and they turned their heads mechanically to look in the direction of the sound. Looking at the man wearing a straw hat with a calm expression. They were too frightened to say a word. At this time, he still dared to say those 3 words. Even God couldn't save him now. Even Nami was almost made to cry by Luffy. It's already this time, why bother irritating him? Nami was on the verge of tears and buried her head in Luffy's shoulder in despair, lamenting in her heart why she followed such an idiot captain. At this moment, after hearing those 3 words, Buggy's expression became extremely sinister, and his whole body seemed to be exuding a terrifying murderous aura, which was frightening. He was suspended in midair, eyes so angry that they were red with bloodshot eyes. He stared at Luffy unblinkingly, filled with murderous intent. Give me, gorgeous to death. Buggy roared hysterically, and a long knife appeared in one of his hands, and 4 small knives appeared between the fingers of the other hand. Just when Buggy activated his ability, he separated his 2 hands and prepared to attack from both sides at the same time. Luffy, who had been motionless, suddenly raised his eyes and looked at Buggy. Suddenly, Buggy, who had an astonishing momentum and filled with murderous intent, making all the pirates present feel scared, suddenly broke out in cold sweat, as if he had been extremely frightened. His pupils were dilated, and his nose was dripping with mucus. The knife in his hand also clanged to the ground at this moment, making a crackling sound. Buggy, who was originally like a devil, seemed to turn into a frightened little sheep in the blink of an eye. This scene immediately confused all the pirates present. Captain Buggy, what happened to him? Why do you suddenly become so scared? No one did anything. Why is this happening? The sound of weapons falling and the pirates' doubts also reached the ears of Nami, who was lying on Luffy's shoulder. She raised her head in confusion, and suddenly felt baffled. Then the next moment, these people collectively saw a scene that they found extremely incredible. Buggy, who was still in a fighting stance with a face full of anger, suddenly retracted his body, returned to his original shape, and then ran up to Luffy with a fawning smile on his face and spoke softly. Mr. Straw Hat, you seem to have something to tell me just now. I wonder what it was. Luffy noticed an elegant chair next to him and thought to himself, why is there any point in standing and talking all the time? So he walked over in a few steps and sat down. Watching this scene, Buggy's group of boys were shocked again. That guy actually sat in Captain Buggy's special seat. Captain Buggy will kill him. Then, these people saw Buggy running over again, still maintaining a fawning smile. At this time, the pirates were completely dumbfounded. Nami was also shocked by Luffy at this time, but she was more confused. She couldn't figure out why the big pirate with a bounty of 15 million Baileys would look up to Luffy. And she was always behind Luffy and never saw him do anything. For Luffy, her curiosity grew. After sitting down, Luffy got down to business and looked at Buggy. Did you get a Grand Line chart from the Marine Fortress in Shieldstown? Buggy hesitated after hearing this, but quickly replied. Yes. Without even waiting for Luffy to speak, he waved his hand and ordered a younger brother, saying, Go get the Grand Line chart for Lousy. The young man was hesitant and confused when he heard this. Captain Buggy, didn't you say that we are going to the Grand Line next, and that navigation chart is essential? Buggy's originally flattering smile suddenly turned back, and when he looked at the younger brother, he had regained his former anger and majesty. Stop blabbering, let Lousy get it quickly. After finishing his words, he turned into a smile again and looked at Luffy. At this moment, everyone present except Yuta was dumbfounded. They all wondered how Luffy managed to make Buggy surrender. At the same time, they were all shocked that Luffy was being served respectfully by a big pirate with a bounty of 15 million. As for Luffy, when Buggy's younger brother went to get the navigation chart, he asked about another thing. Do you have a special Buggy bomb here? Do you have a design drawing? Hearing Luffy ask him about his special Buggy bullets, especially the design drawings, Buggy immediately guessed that Luffy wanted to learn this technology from him. Anger immediately filled his heart, but on the outside, he still looked fawning and answered. Yes, I'll get it for you. After saying this, Buggy turned around to get the design drawings. At this moment, Luffy stopped Buggy. Red Nose, don't try to fool me with a fake design, otherwise you know the consequences. Buggy couldn't help but shudder when he heard this warning. He did think so for a moment just now. But after being warned like this, he was a little scared. Thinking back on the abilities this guy just displayed, there is no doubt that they are the same abilities as Shanks and his original Captain Roger, Conqueror's Hockey. Facing such an opponent, he had no chance of winning. Then he nodded and ran to get the design drawings. Not long after, 2 pictures were sent to Luffy one after another. He had no prior knowledge of the technology of making artillery shells, and his grasp of basic knowledge was almost zero. So even if you have heaven-defying understanding, it is still difficult to understand. But he was secretly observing Buggy, and he seemed to have become much more honest after his reminder. So the design drawings are most likely real. But just to be on the safe side, he still asked Buggy for a Buggy bullet. In case of being cheated, there is a chance to analyze the design method by dissecting the cannonball. After achieving the purpose of this trip, Luffy planned to leave. But before leaving, he planned to do a good deed for the town. Orange Town, the roof of a house. Straw Hat, what are you going to do? Buggy asked in horror, his tone extremely panicked. At this moment, he was chopped into several sections, tied together with ropes, and then put into the cannon. Captain Buggy. Buggy's younger brothers called his name in panic and worry, but no one dared to step forward to stop him. After all, Buggy himself was listening to Luffy's instructions just now. How could they dare to take action now? Luffy was holding a torch at the moment and said to Buggy inside the barrel. Don't worry, with your physical condition, you will be fine. With that said, Luffy lit the fuse. Boom! With a huge roar, Buggy was launched and flew out. At this time, Luffy looked at Buggy, who was gradually shrinking into a small dot, and added slowly. Quote, as long as you're lucky enough not to fall into the ocean. Buggy's younger brothers were all relieved when they heard Luffy's previous words, but when they suddenly heard the next words, they all couldn't help but widen their eyes and recalled an important thing. Captain Buggy is demon fruit power. He will die if he falls into the sea. Hurry up and save Captain Buggy. The next second, they followed the direction Buggy flew away and ran away quickly. Get rich, get rich. So much treasure, at least 10 million Baileys. That Buggy pirates are really rich. Hee, I will accept it without any courtesy. Nami murmured excitedly as he quickly packed the treasures in Buggy's tent into bags. She completely didn't notice that there were 2 people standing behind her at the moment. As for Nami, Luffy also truly admires her greed for money. He had just fired a real Buggy bullet for such fun, but Nami didn't even care. Instead, he secretly ran away to pack the treasure while no one was paying attention. Ahem, Luffy coughed twice, which startled Nami. But this time she was not as flustered as when she first met Luffy. After all, she was now Luffy's crew member, so she said with a smile. Hee, Captain, I'm collecting trophies for us. In fact, what Nami is thinking about is, all these treasures belong to me. I just put them here for safekeeping for the time being, so I won't leave them to you. As soon as Nami finished speaking, she sorted out 2 large bags full of treasures and placed them in front of her. She didn't know where she got the strength, but she was able to hold a bag in one hand and swing it back, carrying 2 large bags of treasure on her back. Then he said to Luffy excitedly, "Okay, let's go, Captain." Watching this scene, Luffy was filled with emotion again. As long as it has something to do with treasure, Nami can explode with infinite power. "Give me a bag." Luffy reached for it. "It's okay, Captain, I can handle it." As Nami spoke, she couldn't help but sigh in her heart. "I didn't expect this idiot to be quite a gentleman." Single quote. Unexpectedly, Luffy added another sentence. "I want this treasure to be useful." With that said, he ignored Nami's doubts and took a bag from the latter's back. Nami didn't know what Luffy was talking about being useful, but Luffy was the captain after all, and she couldn't go against the captain's wishes. After a few people packed up all their things, they set off towards the port where they came from. Luffy and Nami each had a bag of treasure worth about 5 million belly, while Yuta had a package of buggy bombs and 2 blueprints. When they walked to the port, they saw Zoro sitting on the ground meditating and practicing. It seems that the battle just now gave him a new improvement, and he is now integrating all the improvements. Zoro seemed to have sensed movement nearby, so he opened his eyes and stopped meditating. Stopping midway will not waste all his efforts, so he is not in a hurry. "What did you just do?" "I saw all those pirates suddenly ran out to sea and left, taking the 2 guys I defeated with them." Zoro recalled the strange scene he had just seen and asked Luffy doubtfully. "I put their captain in the cannon and fired it. They went to find their captain." Luffy explained briefly and then said, "Okay, it's time for us to set off." After Luffy finished speaking, several people boarded the ship one after another. Suddenly, Nami, who had boarded the ship earlier, suddenly noticed that Luffy had forgot the treasure in his hand on the shore, and suddenly reminded him nervously. "Captain, treasure, you forgot to take the treasure." While being reminded, Nami did not forget to complain in her heart. "What an idiot, he can forget such an important thing." Single quote. But what puzzled her was that even after hearing her reminder, Luffy didn't seem to have any intention of going back to get it. "Luffy." Nami called Luffy's name in confusion, her eyes filled with confusion. Then she saw Luffy standing on the deck, looking at the town ahead and saying, "This town was severely damaged by Buggy and his gang. Many of the treasures we looted from Buggy also belong to the residents of this town. Let the residents here use the 5 million belly to renovate the town. Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through personal experience, your courage is improved. Your courage is increased, and your conqueror's haki is strengthened." A prompt came through Luffy's mind. At the same time, Nami was stunned when she heard Luffy's words. She didn't expect that Luffy, as a pirate, would be willing to give the treasures that could have been his own to these ordinary civilians. Is such a pirate really a pirate? At this moment, Nami smiled. For some reason, she was in an especially good mood. After a few people's boats sailed a certain distance, an old man and a dog appeared on the coast. When they opened the bag and saw the treasures inside, the old man was moved to tears and deeply remembered the faces he had just seen while hiding in a room. Looking at the boat going away, the old man knelt down with a plop and kowtowed gratefully to send him off. "Captain, where are we going next?" Nami looked at the 2 figures on the shore from a distance across the sea, looking particularly happy. "Well, it's time to change to a pirate ship of our own." Luffy rubbed his chin and thought. Alvida's boat is too slow, and Luffy is fed up with the love and pink colors on the boat. If he keeps sailing on the sea in a boat like this, others will think that they have strange quirks inside. "I heard that on the island closest to here, there is a wealthy family that is engaged in the shipping business. I think I heard someone say it was called Zailuobu village before." Zoro recalled the news he heard from others when he was a pirate hunter. Luffy immediately smiled when he heard the familiar name. "Okay, then let's set off and go to Zailuobu village." Silab village is located in a remote sea area of East Blue. Due to its geographical location, few people come to this almost unknown island. So for the residents living on this island, it would seem a bit boring. And their best way to relieve boredom every day is, something bad has happened. The pirates are attacking. The pirates are coming. The pirates are coming. Everyone, run away. In the early morning, a boy with wheat-colored skin and a long nose like Pinocchio ran toward the village shouting in panic. He stood on the street and kept shouting, "The pirates are coming." Soon, the villagers opened their doors one after another. At this time, the long-nosed boy Usopp suddenly laughed. "I lied to you, ha 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 ha." Suddenly, the villagers were irritated and angrily chased Usopp with brooms, pots, pans and other weapons, cursing while chasing him back. "You liar, get away from me today. Stop, you brat." Usopp laughed as he ran away, quickly leaving the villagers behind. After seeing the villagers angrily scolding their mothers, but with no success, Usopp suddenly felt better, covering his mouth and snickering. "Pff hee hee hee. I fooled everyone again today. I'm so happy. I did another good thing today and added a little excitement to this boring village." At this time, Usopp suddenly noticed 4 figures walking from the direction of the coast. "He's someone I've never seen before. He's not from this village." Usopp could tell at a glance that these people were outsiders and muttered, "Is it a pirate?" Usopp carefully identified the 4 people. One of the 4 was a cute girl who was fashionably dressed, one was wearing a straw hat and didn't look like a bad guy, and the other was a beautiful girl with an proud figure and a bit of an eccentric look. Except for the scary green algae head with 3 knives on his waist, the others all look like good people. Usopp quickly made a conclusion in his mind for these people. After realizing that there should be no danger, he bravely showed his face and jumped out. Arriving in front of a few people, Usopp put his hands on his hips and said with great momentum, "Who are you? What are you doing in this village?" "I am Captain Usopp, a brave warrior responsible for protecting this village, with 3,000 men. So I advise you not to have strange thoughts about this village, otherwise my 3 Senju will definitely not let you go." In the original novel, only Luffy would be deceived by Usopp's cheap lies. Now, all 4 of them looked at Usopp with completely unmoved expressions. This quickly made Usopp feel weak, sweat broke out on his forehead, and he began to tremble when he spoke. "Hey, don't believe me. My 3 Senjus are lurking around here." As Usopp spoke, 3 children appeared in his mind. These are his 3 Senju. At this time, Luffy spoke. "We are pirates." When he heard these words, Usopp suddenly felt a chill on his back, his expression became extremely nervous, and he subconsciously wanted to run away. "But I heard," Luffy continue. "I heard that there is a wealthy family here who is engaged in shipping business. We want to buy a pirate ship. You should know who this family is, right Usopp?" Luffy raised his eyebrows when he said the next sentence, as if he knew what Usopp was thinking. Usopp didn't know why he felt like he was being seen through. He had already planned to run away, but when he heard Luffy talking about a wealthy family, he was stunned. Isn't there just one big family in this village? Thinking of that wealthy family, Usopp couldn't help but picture a frail blonde girl. We must not let these pirates get close to Kaya. This was Usopp's only thought at this time. Pirates are dangerous and he can't let them hurt Kaya. Ha, ha ha, you have found the wrong person. There are no rich families here, so please come back. Usopp lied awkwardly, turned around and prepared to leave, going to inform the people in the village and Kaya. At this moment, he suddenly heard the man behind him say, "Usopp, do you want to be a pirate?" This question made Usopp stop immediately. Being a pirate is what he has always dreamed of. However, he had no idea how to take this step. Especially since the one who invited him now was a pirate group that he had just met and didn't understand at all. "I know your father Usopp. He is a very powerful pirate." Luffy sighed with emotion. Usopp turned around suddenly when he heard this and said in surprise, "What, have you seen my father? Where is he now?" At this time, Yuta on the side suddenly reacted and spoke. "Suga, why do you look so familiar to Usopp? It turns out you are Usopp's son. When I was in the Red Hair Pirates, Usopp took great care of me." Hearing that another person said he knew Usopp, Usopp's trust in this group of people increased greatly. "Your father is a sniper for the Red Hair Pirates. He should be somewhere on the Grand Line now." Luffy answered Usopp's question. Then he continued. "How about it? Do you want to be a great sea warrior like your father? Come with us to the Grand Line." Although in the original work, Usopp was timid and cowardly in the early stage, he was still good when he grew up in the later stage. And the most important thing is that Usopp's words are not unfounded. He has repeatedly shown his power in desperate situations and helped Straw Hat Crew out of danger. So Luffy still wants to take him as a crew member. And he was counting on Usopp to help him study the buggy bullet design drawing he took from Buggy. Usopp's bag contains various gunpowder weapons, and he must have some knowledge in this area. Then use Heaven-Defying Comprehension to assist him, and it shouldn't be a big problem to research a cannonball. After hearing his father's name from Luffy's mouth and being invited again, Usopp was extremely moved. If he misses this opportunity, he doesn't know if anyone will invite him next time. If you come with us, you will have a chance to meet your father. The Red Hair Pirates are a large pirate group famous in the Grand Line. Ordinary pirates can never see their faces. Yuta saw that Luffy wanted to recruit Usopp, so he added jealousy next to him. I have to say that the name Usopp is still very useful. Usopp originally wanted to go to sea to follow in his father's footsteps. The thought of meeting his father made him completely excited. Okay, I'll join you. After deciding to join Luffy's group, Usopp took them to Kaya's villa after they briefly got to know each other. On the way, Usopp told Luffy and others about Kaya. The big family you are talking about is Kaya's family. Kaya's parents passed away 3 years ago, and now Kaya manages the entire family. But Kaya is weak and sick, so their family's business is basically handed over to a housekeeper to help take care of it. When it came to the butler, Usopp suddenly became very angry. The butler's name is Crabiter, and he's a very difficult guy to get along with. Every time I went to see Kaya, he would come out and stop me. Anyway, that guy is very annoying. Listening to Usopp complaining about the butler, Luffy felt extremely enlightened. He knew that this butler named Crabadle was actually the captain of the original Crow pirates, known as 100 Strategies, Crow, with a bounty of 16 million, and he was one of the top 3 pirates in East Blue. Speaking of which, the Marine Colonel Monka they defeated in Shields Town was promoted because he caught Clo and sent him to prison. But in fact, the Clo who was caught at the time was just a scapegoat, and the real clue was under the pseudonym Crabiter, lurking here, trying to take away Kaya's property. But Luffy knew this, but he couldn't say it in public, otherwise it would be difficult to explain. He planned to wait until he met Crow before taking action on him, and reveal his identity and plan step by step. Usopp kept talking along the way, telling Luffy and others the story of how he once tore apart a huge octopus with his hands in the ocean. It wasn't until a luxurious villa appeared in the sight of several people that he stopped telling the story and said, "Here we are, this is Kaya's house." As soon as he finished speaking, he hurried to the main entrance. In the past, he sneaked in, but this time he brought people to do business, so he was naturally more confident and went directly to the main entrance. When he was about to knock on the door, he suddenly saw Kaya drinking tea and reading a book in the courtyard garden, and suddenly shouted excitedly. Kaya, who was reading a book, suddenly heard a familiar voice and was surprised. Usopp. She quickly closed the book and ran towards the door. But at this moment, a figure flashed out of the house quickly, came to her in a few steps, and stopped her. "Miss, please pay attention to your body, you can't run away like this yet." Kaya took a deep breath, looked at Crow gently and said, "It's okay, Crabatar, I'm much better than before. Thank you for your concern, Crabatar." Crow glanced at Usopp standing at the door, a chill flashed in his eyes, and then said to Kaya, "Miss, you have spent enough time outside today, please go back to the house and rest quickly." With that said, Crow turned to look at Usopp. "Miss is going to rest now, you'd better come back soon." Although Kaya was a little reluctant to leave, she still listened to the words of the housekeeper who had taken good care of her for the past 3 years. After all, the housekeeper cares so much about her, and if she refuses, it will definitely hurt the housekeeper's heart. Just as she waved goodbye to Usopp, she suddenly saw a few more figures around Usopp. They are," Kaya murmured in confusion. When did Usopp have a few more people around her that she didn't know about? I've never heard Usopp say that before. Crow heard Kaya's muttering and looked back curiously. Then he saw 4 strange people standing next to Usopp. But when he glanced at the 3 knives on Zoro's waist, there was an imperceptible cold light in his eyes. Although he is lurking in this village, it does not mean that he knows nothing about the outside world. He had heard of the pirate hunter Zoro, but he never thought that the other party was here to catch him. After all, he had died 3 years ago. "Who are you?" What's the matter here? Crow returned to his usual butler appearance and came over to interact with Luffy and others. In fact, he wanted to send these people away quickly, so as not to disrupt his plan for 3 days later. Let the present-day Crow pirates attack Syllab village, creating the illusion that Kaya was killed by pirates, and then he successfully inherited Kaya's family property. We are pirates. We heard that there is a shipping business here, so we plan to buy a ship. Luffy acted with Crow. Pirate, Crow repeated doubtfully, then showed a disgusted expression and said, "Sorry, we don't do pirate business, please go back." It was because he was tired of being a pirate that he planned to seize Kaya's property and live a normal life. So when I heard Luffy say that they were pirates, that disgust came to my heart again. And another thing that bothered him wasn't Zoro a pirate hunter? Why are you hanging out with pirates? This made him, the second smartest person in East Blue, the first being Ben Beckman, feel that something was fishy. In order for the plan to proceed smoothly, he had to eliminate all factors that might affect the situation. Speaking of which, I seem to have seen you somewhere. At this time, Luffy suddenly said something irrelevant. But when Crow heard this, his heart suddenly tightened and he frowned slightly. Luffy pretended to be thinking, and suddenly seemed to remember it all at once, and said, "By the way, you are Crow, right? The 100 Plan Crow with a bounty of 16 million Baileys. I saw your bounty list from 3 years ago in the Marine base in Shields Town. It was in that Menka in the office." Of course, Luffy made up this sentence casually. He just wanted to force Crow to reveal his secret, and he mentioned Menka specifically to increase credibility. Hearing Luffy say that Krabatar turned out to be the pirate Crow, Usopp's eyes suddenly jumped out of fear, but when he thought that the other party was beside Kaya, he immediately plucked up the courage and pretended to be calm. "Hey, Klo, are you really a pirate? Hurry up and stay away from Kaya." Kaya also felt extremely unbelievable at this time. She looked at Crow weakly and murmured, "Krabatal." While everyone was waiting for Crow's reply, Nami, who had been staying by Luffy's side, suddenly looked at Luffy in confusion and asked, Is there a reward list for Crow in that office? Why didn't I see it?" Luffy was speechless when he heard this. He really has a good teammate. But he still maintained his vow. You only have treasure in your eyes, how can you pay attention to other things? One sentence made Nami's face turn red and she smiled sheepishly. Crow, who had been silent for a long time, finally made a move. He dragged his glasses with his palms and stared coldly at Luffy. He just captured a piece of information from the conversation between Luffy and Nami, that is, they had indeed been to Menka's office. Although he didn't know why the pirate went to Colonel Marine's office, it seemed like it was not fake. I couldn't help but curse in my heart why that idiot Menka had caught him, and still wanted to keep his bounty list. But even so, Crow still remained calm and said, "I think you got the wrong person, sir. I am Krabatal, the butler here, not some pirate Crow." At this time, Kaya also stepped forward to speak for Crow. "Yes, Krabatar has been a housekeeper here for 3 years. He has always been gentle and kind. He is not a pirate. You must have mistaken the man in the straw hat." With Kaya's protection, Crow couldn't help but become more confident. How could this stupid young lady doubt him based on Luffy's words alone? In the past 3 years, he has completely gained the trust of this young lady. Failure to produce conclusive evidence that he is Crow will not change Kaya's opinion. At this point, Crow continues to hit back at Luffy. "Everything depends on evidence, sir. Just like you just admitted yourself that you are a group of pirates." Crow cleverly took the opportunity to point out the fact that Luffy and others were a group of pirates, but if they were pirates, their credibility would be even lower. Then, he looked at Usopp again, with a cold look in his eyes. "It's okay for you to come here to disturb young lady's rest. Today, you brought a group of pirates to approach young lady. What's your intention?" As expected, he is indeed the son of a filthy pirate. How could he come up with an excuse to frame me to get close to the lady? When he heard Crow say the word, dirty, Usopp's previous fear completely disappeared and was replaced by anger. Crow knows that Usopp's weakness is his father, so he wants to use this to anger Usopp and make him show his cruel side in front of Kaya, thus severing their relationship. Just when he was about to further stimulate Usopp, Luffy spoke at this moment. "You want proof, right?" Crow couldn't help being stunned when he heard this. He looked at Luffy curiously. Knowing that this person was the most difficult person for the group to deal with, he frowned slightly and nodded. That's right. You can't just let me take on the name of a dirty pirate just because of your words, right? Hearing that Crow classified his past self as dirty, Luffy couldn't help but lament his determination to leave the past behind completely. But it was a sigh of relief. He still wanted to expose Crow's true face. Yuta, sing a song. Luffy said suddenly. This sentence shocked everyone present. Sing. What song should I sing at this time? Only Yuta immediately understood what Luffy meant, jumped to the roof of Kaya's villa, and started singing. Everyone looked confused when they saw this, not knowing why. Then, all of them saw an incredible scene. The scene around them suddenly changed, and the original land turned into a colorful runway like a rainbow. Kaya's villa became a stage, and the flowers and plants in the yard turned into notes that had the rhythm of life. In just the blink of an eye, all of them came to a magnificent world of music. This is the ability of Yuta's song fruit, which can invisibly bring the human spirit into a musical world through music. As long as you hear Yuta's singing, no matter where you are or how powerful you are, you can't avoid Yuta's ability. And people who enter the world of music don't even know they've fallen into competence. At this moment, their bodies have all turned into shells, and in reality they are completely controlled by Yuta. Within the spiritual world, what's going on? Nami exclaimed as she looked at everything new around her. So beautiful. Kaya looked at the rhythmic notes and fresh environment around her and said in surprise. Something bad has happened. Kaya's home is gone. Usopp feels sad that Kaya will not have a place to live in the future. Devil fruit. Zoro realized the reason instantly. Crow naturally guessed that this was Devil Fruit's ability, but he only felt that things were getting worse and worse, and his brows became more and more frowned. At this time, Luffy searched the memory in his mind and passed Crow's reward list and related information to Yuta through comprehension transmission. Yuta, on the other hand, used her ability to turn notes into anything she wanted to transform into Crow's bounty list and related information in front of everyone. I saw this reward list and information in Menka's office. See for yourselves, Luffy said to the others. In fact, he made up this information by selecting some information that could prove Crow's identity. Soon, Nami, Usopp and Kaya Zoro took the information and the reward list and started reading. This reward list does look exactly the same. Several people glanced at the reward list and then at Crow, and they indeed looked exactly the same. The information says that due to his fighting habits, Crow is used to holding his glasses with his palms. Everyone looked up and saw that Crow was dragging his glasses with his palms. The information says that Crow's weapon is a pair of cat claw gloves, and there is a weapon called espada hidden inside the gloves. Everyone looked up and saw that Crow was wearing a pair of cat claw gloves on his hands. A few people looked at the information in their hands for a while, and then looked at Crow for a while. Every characteristic described in the data is completely consistent with Crow's. Enough. Finally, Crow couldn't bear it anymore. Enough. Crow shouted angrily, and his temperament suddenly changed. The butler who originally looked gentle and gentle suddenly became exuding a dangerous aura. Immediately, the second of the timid trio, Usopp and Nami, was so frightened that they backed away and hid behind Luffy, Zoro and others. Kaya, on the other hand, became disbelieving after noticing the change in Crow and said, "Crobattle, are you really? Pirate Crow?" When Crow interrupted these people angrily, he no longer planned to pretend. At this time, he sneered, dragged his glasses with his palm, and said, "It's been 3 years. I've been holding back for this goal for 3 years. For the past 3 years, I have lived a disgusting life every day, pretending to be a housekeeper that makes me feel sick in front of a stupid young lady like you." Kaya's eyes turned white when she heard this, looking in disbelief. One of the most trusted people around her suddenly slandered her and said that those behaviors that made her trust were all fake. No one can accept this. Kaya, Usopp gave a worried cry, mustered up the courage to rush out, quickly pulled Kaya behind Luffy, and hid. At this time, Crow continued to speak angrily. 3 days, only 3 days, I can achieve my goal. In a pirate attack, I took advantage of the accidental death of the owner of this villa. I can legitimately inherit the inheritance and live as an ordinary person. Villa owner, Usopp muttered, then reacted and stuck his head out angrily to ask. You guys, do you want to kill Kaya in 3 days? Crow sneered. Not bad. Just like the accidental death of her parents. As soon as Crow said this, Kaya's pupils suddenly trembled and she said in shock and anger. Chloe, my parents. Crow sneered again. Yes, I killed them all. You stupid young lady, you still regard me, your enemy, as the person you trust the most. How pathetic. At this moment, Kaya was so shocked by the continuous messages that she could hardly breathe. Her already weak body suddenly fell down and fainted in Nami's arms. Kaya, Usopp screamed worriedly, then looked at Crow angrily and roared. You fool, I'm going to kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, Usopp took out a slingshot from his bag, aimed at Crow, and shot. Must kill gunpowder star. A small black ball flew quickly in front of Crow. Just when he was about to reach Crow, he suddenly raised his hand, and 5 sharp claws popped out from the fingertips of his gloves, and he swung forward. Boom! There was an explosion, but Crow was unhurt. Don't insult me, Chloe, with a toy like yours. Crow roared in a deep voice, looking at Luffy and the others with murderous intent. Usopp instantly realized the gap with his opponent and hit again. Crow said again, I should be the one going on a killing spree. His eyes were fixed on Luffy. If it hadn't been for you, my identity wouldn't have been exposed. That stupid young lady would have died for me willingly. It's all because of you outsiders. Today, none of you can even think of leaving here alive. When Crow finished speaking, the claws on the other hand were also released. Suddenly, his hands seemed to have lost consciousness, and they hung down weakly, and his body became rickety. Seeing this scene, Nami suddenly thought of something, picked up the information in his hand and exclaimed. The information says that when Crow becomes like this, he will release his strongest move, Spoon, and use Silent Step to launch an indiscriminate attack. Gotta stop him quick, Luffy. Luffy looked at Crow who was about to launch his ultimate move, and did not choose to interrupt him immediately but said to Yuta. Yuta, disable it. He lets Yuta use his powers just to expose Crow's identity. But now that the goal has been achieved, there is no point in continuing to maintain the music world. Upon hearing this, Yuta began to sing again. In the blink of an eye, everyone present felt as if their bodies had suddenly lost control, and they felt as if they were being pulled away. After a brief period of confusion, when they woke up again, they found that they had fainted and were lying on the ground. It's so weird. Nami sat up from the ground, his eyes full of confusion and surprise. It's great, Yuta's home is still there. Usopp is still obsessed with the issue of Kaya's residence. What a terrifying ability. Zoro couldn't help but sigh, and instantly thought that they must have fallen into Yuta's ability unconsciously, but in reality, their bodies were in a coma state and could be easily killed at any time. As for Crow, he looked at Luffy with confusion in his eyes. Why didn't you kill me just now? Luffy chuckled upon hearing this. It's too easy to kill you, but just like you used Kaya, I have other uses for keeping you alive. After finishing speaking, Luffy said to the others. Zoro, he's in your hands. Everyone else, get out of here. After everyone heard the words, they immediately followed the instructions, and Kaya was taken away with them. Crow also realized at this time that Luffy planned to let him be Zoro's sparring partner. Suddenly, his anger was completely aroused. You, daughter unforgivable. Crow roared in a deep voice, and immediately entered a fighting stance, as if he was about to release the spoon. Fighting is the fastest way to improve your strength. So even if Luffy could make Yuta directly kill Crow's body just now, or he himself could directly kill Crow instantly, he didn't do so. He just took a fancy to Crow's extremely fast and silent attack method. For Zoro, this will be an extremely suitable training object for him at this stage. Luffy then used comprehension channeling to give Zoro the ability to heaven-defying comprehension, which would maximize his improvement in battle. Zoro, be careful to use your haki. If you really can't dodge, use your weapon to block it. Luffy reminds Zoro that this is also a good opportunity for Zoro to practice his knowledge. Zoro nodded solemnly when he heard this, and then entered the fighting state with all his heart. The next second, Crow's figure suddenly disappeared, and Luffy also jumped aside at this moment. Leave the battlefield to the two of them. For Luffy, an opponent of Crow's level is no improvement to him because he is not on the same level at all. His current physique is considered top-notch after more than 10 years of practice. The only one who needs improvement now is hockey. And since he went to sea, he has encountered 2 events that can improve Conqueror's hockey. This number of incidents has reached the number of incidents that he could only encounter in Windmill Village for several years. And encountering different events, showing different levels of courage, and the level of Conqueror's improvement is also different. For example, his improvement in helping to rebuild a town's residences' homes in Orangetown was much greater than his improvement in not embarrassing Marine in Shields Town. Therefore, even if Luffy has not met any suitable opponent, his strength has been growing rapidly. So strong. In the distance, Usopp and Nami watched the battle between Zoro and couldn't help but sigh. They couldn't even catch Crow's movements. But Zoro was able to dodge or use weapons to block the dizzying attacks again and again. Watching the fierce battle between the two, Luffy also sighed secretly. Sure enough, this extreme state is the most stimulating in improving human potential. He could even clearly see that Zoro's mastery of sight and color was rapidly improving, and his combat ability was also continuously strengthened. The battle between Zoro and Crow ended with Zoro's rapid growth in the battle and his gradual suppression of his opponent. Because Luffy gave him the blessing of heaven-defying understanding, and Crow was a rare opponent. This greatly improved Zoro in this battle. In particular, his sense of knowledge has begun to take shape, and it has a little bit of a look. Luffy simply estimated that Zoro's current strength has roughly reached the stage where he defeated Mr. One in Alabasta in the original work. At that time, he cut through steel for the first time, and his strength took a leap forward. But now, because he has been exposed to the hockey field early and has various assistance from Luffy, his strength has improved rapidly. After defeating Crow, the group rested and adjusted in Kaya's villa. After Kaya woke up, she also expressed her sincere gratitude to Luffy and others, and asked Melly, another housekeeper of the villa, to help Luffy and others build a pirate ship as a thank you gift. After learning the news, Luffy found Melly alone. Mr. Luffy, you came at the right time. Actually, I have been dreaming of building my dream boat, Going Merry, since I was very young. Now the boat is almost completed. You only need to stay here for about 3 more days, and then this ship can be given to you. Melly excitedly introduced Luffy to his dream boat. But Luffy spoke at this time. In fact, we are planning to go to the Grand Line. I heard that the environment there is very harsh, so I hope you can strengthen the ship as a whole, especially the position of the keel. The Golden Melly in the original book completely lost its ability to sail after experiencing Sky Island. In addition, the keel was damaged beyond repair, and it had no choice but to be burned down by fire. And Luffy naturally doesn't want to see this happen. Even if the Golden Mary cannot support subsequent voyages in the future, he hopes that the Going Merry will be intact when changing ships. It would be best to modify it again and build a brand new ship that can support the next voyage. Mary was a little embarrassed when he heard this. Mr. Luffy, Going Merry is almost at the final stage. If it is to be reinforced as a whole at this time, part of the hull will have to be dismantled and rebuilt. I'm afraid this will take a lot of time, and I'm afraid I can't afford the cost. Luffy said directly. Just reinforce it, we can wait. If you need money, we have about 10 million belly here. Have you seen enough? Melly nodded repeatedly. That's enough. We won't need as much as 10 million. I estimate that it will take about 3 million. In terms of time, it will take about 10 days. If you are willing to wait, Mr. Luffy, then I will do my best to help you build a strong enough Golden Melly. Luffy breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that Going Merry could be reinforced. Then it's up to you, Mr. Melly. After leaving Melly, Luffy told several others that they would have to wait here for a while. After that, Luffy let Yuta and Zoro practice on their own. Nami, on the other hand, was bored and found some books about navigation and weather in Kaya's villa and started studying them. Luffy found Usopp and planned to let him start research on buggy bullets. Call Usopp to a research room provided by Melly. Luffy took out the design drawings of buggy bullets. Usopp, look at this drawing. Usopp curiously took the drawing and studied it carefully. But as he watched, Usopp's brows knitted tightly together. After a moment, he looked at Luffy in shock and asked. Luffy, where did you get this drawing? The method recorded here seems to be able to develop a very unusual cannonball. Luffy said in surprise when he heard this. Do you understand? Usopp looked at the drawings with thoughtful and confused eyes. I can understand the simplest ones, but for more complex ones I have to look up the book. After leaving the research room, after a while, Usopp came back with several extremely thick books on artillery and gunpowder. The gunpowder star he studied before was learned from these books. But because he only learned the basics, the power of what he researched was very small. When Usopp was looking at the drawings and looking for relevant information in the book, Luffy spoke at this moment. Usopp, now read all these books from the beginning. Usopp suddenly showed a bitter expression after hearing this. Luffy, my strongest talent is in sniping, and I only scratch the surface of my research. Even if you asked me to read these books from the beginning, I wouldn't be able to learn the advanced techniques in them. Luffy ignored Usopp's words and continued. You listen to me. Usopp had no choice but to pick up a book and start reading from the first page. However, Usopp was stunned when he looked at it. He unexpectedly found that his brain seemed to have awakened today. He usually could not understand the difficult to understand knowledge, but now he could not only remember and understand it extremely easily, but he could even relate it to the knowledge he had read before. Soon, Usopp was immersed in the joy of exploring in depth. 3 days later. This is the day that Crow mentioned that the Crow pirates are about to attack. The current captain Zangao led a group of more than 100 men to land. However, what was waiting for them was Zoro, who was already prepared. For Zoro now, it's enough to kill this group of people by himself. And it is also a good opportunity to improve your strength. And Luffy is still by Usopp's side to help him learn relevant knowledge. Within 3 days, Usopp had almost finished reading several books. Now there is only the last part left. Call. Usopp took a long breath and closed the book, his eyes brighter than ever. In the past few days, he seemed to have discovered a new world, and every moment brought excitement and surprise to his mind. He also thoroughly experienced an art in these books. Explode. Luffy once again showed the drawings to Usopp. This time, Usopp looked at the drawings as if he were looking at ordinary arithmetic problems, and all the knowledge seemed extremely simple and easy to understand. He even shook his head in dissatisfaction. This design still has certain flaws. It cannot exert its maximum power at all. And it seems that it can be improved, and several other new types of artillery shells can be researched and designed. At this moment, Usopp's brain was spinning rapidly. And there were hints in Luffy's mind. Your understanding is heaven-defying. Through enlightenment and transmission, your conductor has understanding, deductive understanding. Improved buggy bullet. Improved buggy bomb. Improved on the basis of the original buggy bomb to further enhance its power. Normal shell size, 1.5 times more powerful than the original buggy shell. Your understanding is heaven-defying, and through enlightenment and transmission, your transmitter has understanding, and deductive understanding. Mini buggy bullet. Mini buggy shells. Improved on the basis of improved buggy shells, further purified and concentrated, and then optimized into portable small shells. It is the size of a pea and is 1.5 times more powerful than the original buggy bomb. Your understanding is heaven-defying, and through enlightenment and transmission, your conductor has some understanding, and the inference and understanding. Super buggy bullet. Super buggy shells. Improved on the basis of mini buggy shells, more gunpowder is concentrated and fused to create a powerful super shell. Normal shell size, 10 times more powerful than the original buggy shell. Luffy was shocked when he saw the introduction about super buggy bullet. One buggy bomb can destroy several streets, and with 10 times the power, it is enough to easily destroy a large city or a small island. This is simply a nuclear bomb. However, at this stage, they still cannot research such a big killer weapon. This kind of shells requires a lot of gunpowder, and the money to buy gunpowder alone is not what they can afford now. As for the improved buggy bullets and mini buggy bullets, their money can afford a few rounds. Luffy planned to ask Usopp to purchase a batch of materials when he went to a big town to start developing these two types of artillery shells. Within the next 7 days, Luffy also taught Usopp ultimate bodybuilding technique and dual-color hockey, and asked him to start practicing as well. 7 days later, Silawabu village, on the coast. Mr. Luffy, this is the enhanced version of the golden melee I built for you. Based on the original foundation, I carried out comprehensive reinforcement and also slightly expanded it. Although the form is a bit old, it was carefully designed by me. It is a fast-sailing ship with a jib for the mizzenmast and a center rudder for the stern. I believe it can meet your requirements and sail on the Grand Line. Mary excitedly introduced his upgraded version of Going Merry to Luffy and others, his eyes shining with excitement. The rest of the people, including Luffy, were also very excited when they saw the golden Melly in front of them, which was slightly larger than the original version and looked sturdier. Wow, what a beautiful boat. It must be a joy to sing on this ship. From today on, is this our own pirate ship? It looks great. I must take good care of the boat that Kaya gave us. While the rest of the people were sighing, Luffy suddenly jumped onto the boat and looked at the people below with twinkling eyes. Everyone, there are pirate ships, and of course the pirate flag cannot be lowered. As he spoke, Luffy waved his right hand, and a flag fluttering in the wind flew in the air, catching everyone's eyes. On the flag is a skull wearing a straw hat. From now on, we are the Straw Hat Pirates. Everyone below looked at the flying flag, and Kakuzu couldn't help but raise their mouths. Oh, X4. Kaya, everyone, I'm leaving, everyone, take care. Usopp waved goodbye to the villagers. Usopp, come on. Mr. Luffy, thank you. Kaya softly wished and thanked Luffy and others. After bidding farewell to these villagers, the Straw Hats officially set sail. Yoshi. Captain Usopp leads his 4 Senju men and sets sail. Usopp stood on the deck, raised his right hand and cheered. Usopp, do you want to disembark from here? Luffy's voice drifted slowly. We were already out of the coast, and below was the sea filled with all kinds of ferocious marine life. Usopp suddenly broke into a cold sweat, swallowed, and said tremblingly. Vice Captain Usopp. Halfway through the words, Yuta's doubts also sounded. Usopp shivered even more. Then, what should I be? Usopp, you will be the sniper on this ship from now on, and all the cannons on the ship will be handed over to you. Luffy then arranged a position for Usopp that suited him. Usopp immediately became energetic when he heard this. Yoshi, Sniper King Usopp, get in position. After the boat sailed into the deep sea, Luffy became interested. Decided to test Usopp's ability. Usopp, see that rock over there? Sink it. Luffy sat on the bow of the boat, pointing to a rock in a certain direction. Usopp glanced at it, then smiled confidently. It's a piece of cake, leave it to me. After a short period of control and adjustment, Usopp aimed at the rock in the distance. Boom! A cannonball flew out, and Luffy and others clearly saw the arc of the cannonball, and it accurately landed on the rock. Boom! With an explosion, the rock suddenly shattered into pieces. Not bad. Luffy sighed in admiration. Usopp's sniping talent is indeed top-notch. Others also expressed their sincere recognition of Usopp's abilities. After being appreciated and recognized by all the members, Usopp immediately felt energetic, crossed his arms and looked like a master. HMPH. My Sniper King, Usopp, is not just for nothing. If it were in the original novel, Luffy would probably be extremely exaggerated by surrounding Usopp and praising him. However, now, after seeing Usopp showing off like this, the others all dispersed and went about their own business. Hey, you guys are too disrespectful to me, aren't you? I'm the Sniper King. Usopp suddenly became extremely frustrated when he was ignored. He asked people everywhere to praise him, but no one understood him. Who fired that accurate cannonball just now? Suddenly I heard someone ask this question. Usopp suddenly looked surprised. It's me. Looking back, I saw a guy with a knife climbing out of the sea and standing on the deck, all wet. Next to him, there was a man who looked like he was dying. Suga, was it you, the idiot, who beat me? The man holding the knife suddenly roared, raised the knife and struck Usopp. When Usopp saw that the situation was not good, he immediately raised his hands and ran to Luffy who was on the bow of the boat, fearfully asking for help. Luffy, save me. Luffy glanced at the person and was suddenly startled. Aren't these two people Joseph and Johnny? It seemed like he was Zoro's younger brother before, right? Luffy rubbed his chin as he thought about it. Johnny. At this time, Zoro's voice suddenly came from behind Johnny. Johnny looked back when he heard the familiar voice and was suddenly surprised. Brother Zoro. Brother Zoro has become a pirate now. Zoro said. Well, anyway, after going through a lot of things, I no longer want to be a pirate hunter. By the way, why are you here? Where is Joseph? Hearing Zoro mention Joseph, Johnny suddenly thought of something, became extremely worried, and asked for help. Brother Zoro, you must save Joseph. The guy has scurvy and is dying. We were resting on that rock just now, but suddenly we were hit by a cannonball. We saw this pirate ship nearby, so we came to find it. Everyone on the boat looked embarrassed when they heard this, and almost got shot to death. At this time, Luffy came over. Scurvy. Just take some vitamins and it'll be fine. Usopp, go to our kitchen and get some oranges. Soon, Usopp brought oranges. Johnny squeezed a large amount of orange juice into Joseph's mouth. The next second, the dying Joseph suddenly jumped up. Yeah, come to life. Then, he and Johnny hugged each other to celebrate. Luffy and others looked speechless. It can't be cured so quickly. It will take some time to rest. As soon as he finished speaking, Joseph fell to the ground again and returned to his dying appearance. Hey Johnny, do you know where I can find a chef around here? We're looking to hire a chef. At this time, Luffy suddenly asked. He was thinking of finding a restaurant on the sea and recruiting Sanji to join him, but he didn't know how to go there. I happened to meet Johnny and the two, and thought that in the original book it was these two who took Luffy and his gang to the restaurant on the sea, so I started asking. When Johnny heard this, he thought of a place without much thought. If you're looking for a sea chef, I know a place. But whether the chef there will come is another matter. That restaurant on the sea, Barati. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.